विमल जी, कल का जो केस पड़ा था
यस सर।
के जो समोसे पान वाले कचौड़ी वाले कानपुर में, द सॉर्ट ऑफ द रेवेन्यू दे आर मेकिंग इज फैंटास्टिक। आई
यस
थिंक
करेक्ट।
हम सबको भी पान कचौड़ियां ही खूब बेचनी चाहिए। वी ऑल विल बी बेटर ऑफ।
सीनियर वीपी साहब, आप कहाँ से ज्वाइन कर रहे हैं? यू आर ज्वाइनिंग फ्रॉम ऑफिस और बिकॉज वी वर वेटिंग फॉर यू इन द ऑफिस?
आई एम 2 rooms away from you, डॉक्टर शर्मा जी।
जी जी,
यहीं से, यहाँ पे पीएचडी चैम्बर।
ओके ओके, राइट सर।
हाँ जी, हाँ। तो मेरा ये कहना है, हमारे को जो डिपार्टमेंट है इनका फोकस ये होना चाहिए कि जितने ज्यादा लोगों को कवर कर सकें।
यस करेक्ट, यस करेक्ट।
We've got only, I think, 3% of our population जो टैक्स दे रहा है।
Yes, right. Yes, right.
Now this is the issue. This is the issue which should be tackled, and not कि जो हमारे लोग हैं उनकी गर्दन निचोड़ते रहो।
No, it's not. It's not.
People should feel very happy in coming into the GST net and contributing to nation building.
See, when this Joint Secretary GST Council Rahman sir came, just keeping you informed, now he's being promoted as a Principal Commissioner Custom Preventive.
Very good.
New Delhi.
जी, जी.
Now, when he came to our program for GST Day celebration, I was telling him one live example of Kachori Bala in Chandni Chowk. he would be making revenue of 1 crore rupees, but he's not GST registered.
अरे नाम किसी का मत लिया करो भाई, क्यों बेचारे को मरवा रहे हो?
No, I didn't name it. I only said in a casual approach, sir, एक कचौड़ी वाला है चांदनी चौक में, और उसकी 1 करोड़ रुपए की इनकम है और जीएसटी में वो रजिस्टर्ड नहीं है।
जी।
मैंने उससे पूछा, आप जीएसटी में क्यों रजिस्टर्ड नहीं हो? He gave only 2 आंसर टू मी. उसने पहले कहा, सर मैं बिजनेस करने के लिए यहाँ बैठा हुआ हूँ, आप एक कॉम्प्लिकेशन में मुझे मत फंसाओ। जीएसटी को वो कॉम्प्लिकेशन मांगता है। तो एक हमारा ऑर्गेनाइज सेक्टर है, एक हमारा अनऑर्गेनाइज सेक्टर है। अनऑर्गेनाइज सेक्टर को अगर हम ऑर्गेनाइज में लाना चाहते हैं, कुछ प्रॉपर हैंड होल्डिंग होनी चाहिए, प्रॉपर ट्रेनिंग होनी चाहिए, प्रॉपर उनको एजुकेशन होनी चाहिए, और कुछ उनको प्लेटर देना चाहिए कि 3 साल तक हम तेरे अगेंस्ट में कोई एक्शन नहीं लेंगे।
बिल्कुल।
कोई भी तेरे से प्रोसीजरल नॉन कॉम्प्लायंसेस हो गया, तू घबरा मत, तू पहले मेन स्ट्रीम को ज्वाइन कर,
और पीछे का भी कुछ नहीं करेंगे, ये भी बोलना बहुत जरूरी है।
अगर नहीं बोलेंगे ना, तो इनके मन में भय बैठा हुआ है कि एक बार हमने रजिस्ट्रेशन ले लिया तो फिर हमें दिक्कत हो जाएगी, हमें प्रॉब्लम हो जाएगी।
बिल्कुल, बिल्कुल।
आज का प्रोग्राम बेसिकली वी आर थ्रोइंग लाइट ऑन दिस सर्च एंड सीजर, इंस्पेक्शन, अरेस्ट, रिकवरी, प्रोविजनल असेसमेंट। हम उन्हीं पॉइंटों को आज टच कर रहे हैं कि लोगों के मन में डर बैठ गया है, भय बैठ गया है। अच्छा, ये प्रोविजन बनाए उनके लिए जो टैक्स इवेडर है, पर परेशान होते हैं ऑनेस्ट टैक्स पेयर।
बिल्कुल, बिल्कुल।
बैलेंसिंग एक्ट जो है, बैलेंसिंग एक्ट समवॉट मिसिंग, वो निकल के नहीं आ रही है सर। और बार बार हम इसे यही कह रहे हैं कि आप करो, आपने जो भी एक्शन लेना है लो, लेकिन आप ऐसे लो कि ऑनेस्ट टैक्स पेयर परेशान ना हो, उसकी जब बिजनेस खत्म ना हो।
Absolutely, absolutely.
Let's see, we are keep advocating from our PhD chamber that they should simplify rather than making it complicated, and which is not helping us altogether. The message of GST must not go as negative. The message of GST must go as a positive. Somewhat they have to understand this aspect.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
डॉक्टर शर्मा स्टार्ट कर लें? आप अनम्यूट करें डॉक्टर शर्मा अपने आप को।
Yes sir, sorry. So shall we start, Chairman sir, with your permission?
Yeah, but थोड़ा सा बैकग्राउंड दे दीजिए आईडीटी कमेटी का, what activities we are doing and how we are representing PhD Chamber of Commerce. Then you invite Senior VP Multani sir.
Right sir, right. Thank you very much, Chairman sir, and Senior VP sir, Shri Pradeep Multani ji, and distinguished participants, guests. We are very, very thankful to you for your kind participation and sparing your valuable time. As mentioned by Chairman sir, that IDT committee, IDT committee's activities, we are very, very proactive, and we are representing so many issues of trade and industry to Government of India, and there is strong action by the government also. And most of the representations I would say more than 75% of representations by PhD chamber have been accepted by the respective departments of Government of India and the state governments. So today's program is very, very meaningful, as we are going to see the good and simple tax environment in the coming times, as mentioned by our chairman a few minutes ago, that there must be more and more ease of doing business to become a $5 trillion dollar economy and to attain a high growth trajectory and to become more and more visible in the global charts. So it has been almost 4 years since the introduction of goods and services tax. That is India's biggest tax reform so far during the history of, I believe, more than 100 years. While the businesses are still struggling to come to terms with the plethora of changes in the GST laws, the pandemic disrupted the business operations during the last, I believe, more than 1 year. When the businesses entities are struggling and their survival amid pandemic, COVID-19 is becoming more and more difficult, and corona waves are impacting and hitting again and again. GST department is issuing notices for conducting GST audit, inspection, search, seizure, and arrest, as mentioned by our chairman. Considering all these developments, so we have organized this program to discuss the various issues of the industry and to move forward with the representations to the government for their consideration and effective action, so that GST becomes really good and simple tax and contributes a lot in the trajectory of Indian economy in terms of increased revenue and to meet up the government finances and to develop infrastructure, state-of-the-art infrastructure for the development of the economy. So with these words, I would like to invite our Senior Vice President, Shri Pradeep Multani ji, for his welcome remarks. And thereafter, we will be discussing the issues related to GST, which have been raised during the last 1 year due to the COVID-19 and other so many developments in the economy. So over to you, Shri Pradeep Multani ji, for your welcome remarks.
Thank you very much, Dr. S. Sharma ji. A very good afternoon to all of you. Welcome to the webinar on Search, Seizure, Arrests, Recovery and Provisional Attachment, Intricacies and Way Forward. We have today with us expert panelists, Mr. Sudipta Bhattacharjee, partner Khaitan and Company, Mr. Dharnendra Kumar Rana, partner Nitya Tax Associates, Mr. Shivam Mehta, partner Lakshmi Kumaran and Sridharan, Mr. Bimal Jain, Chairman, Indirect Taxes Committee, delegates, friends from media, ladies and gentlemen. Friends, with the COVID situation improving, fall in positivity rate and vaccination drive keeping pace, it appears to many that we have won the war against this pandemic. However, I would like to reiterate that we must not lower the guard and take all precautions such as that we do not have to witness the third wave, whose threat is looming hard in the coming 2-3 months due to the constant callous approach being adopted by citizens. We are already seeing the problems in United Kingdom and in USA where the third wave is coming forward. With this advisory, I would now come to today's webinar on search, seizure, arrests, recovery and provisional attachment, intricacies and way forward. Today's webinar aims at providing detailed insights of the various laws and provisions related to the search, seizure, arrest, recovery, and provisional attachment under GST law. Friends, in any tax administration, the provisions for inspection, search, and seizure are provided to protect the interests of genuine taxpayers, as the tax evaders, by evading the tax, get an unfair advantage over the genuine taxpayers. These provisions are also required to safeguard and protect interests of revenue. It may be mentioned that the options of inspection, search, and seizure should be exercised only in exceptional circumstances and as a last resort. Thus, to ensure that these provisions are properly, effectively, and rights of taxpayers are also protected, it is stipulated that inspection, search, or seizure can only be carried out by a proper officer as envisaged by legislatures. That is rank of Joint Commissioner or above in GST law. Only when such proper officer has reasons to believe regarding the existence of such exceptional circumstances. It is well settled law that search and seizure being an inroad on the fundamental right of citizen, which adversely affects his reputation and paralyzes his business. Therefore, while exercising such powers, the authorities should be rather careful and cautious and must exercise it strictly under the authority of the law. In today's webinar, our tax experts present on the panel will touch upon numerous issues arising out of search, seizure, arrest, recovery, and provisional attachment. I'm sure it is going to be a rewarding session for all and redress some of your concerns on the subject. On this note, once again, I welcome all the participants to today's webinar and congratulate our chair, Mr. Bimal Jain, for always organizing outstanding such programs. Thank you, Jai Hind, and God bless everyone.
Thank you very much, Senior Vice President Shri Pradeep Multani ji. I would like to mention that he is a stalwart of the Ayush industry and is trying his best to promote traditional systems of medicines across the world by addressing different seminars and sensitizing various embassies and other international delegations and delegates from abroad, and doing advocacy on different issues on behalf of industry, majorly for the ease of doing business of the states. He has more than 40 years of experience in the field of Ayurvedic and Unani medicines sector and has been chairman of the 81 years old a young multi-crore Ayurveda and Unani company for more than 30 years. Thank you very much, Senior VP Sir, for your very, very practical suggestions, and we look forward with your guidance. We will be able to represent an effective representation to the Government of India. Now, I would like to invite our chairman, Shri Bimal Jain ji, for providing the theme presentation. Mr. Bimal Jain is the chairman and chairman of the Indirect Taxes Committee of PSD Chamber of Commerce and Industry. He is a member of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India since May 1924 and member of Institute of Company Secretaries of India since December 2006, along with a bachelor's degree in law. Also, he is a qualified SAP FICO consultant and has more than 21 years experience in indirect taxation and specializations in all aspects of goods and services tax. He is known in the industry for his valuable thoughts and suggestions to the Government of India, and he always represents PSD Chamber in the annual exercise of budget of the Government of India and make effective representation to the government for consideration. And I would congratulate and must say that more than 90% of the suggestions every year are accepted by the Government of India, given by Shri Bimal Jain ji through the PSD Chamber of Commerce and Industry for the growth and development of the economy. So now I would like to invite Shri Bimal Jain ji for his theme presentation. Thank you very much, sir.
At the outset, let me thank Senior VP Sri Multani ji for joining today and giving his welcome remarks. Thanking learned keynote all the speakers of today's webinar, Dr. S.P. Sharma, Taranjeet, team of IDT Committee, PSD Chamber of Commerce, and all the participants who are attending today for the important webinar and topic which we are going to discuss today: inspection, search, seizure, arrest, recovery, provisional attachment, and these are important terms as on date. Lot of news in the market for the search and seizure, arrest provision. Today we are going to deliberate what are the provision existing under GST law for the search and seizure or arrest provision, recovery provision, provisional attachment provision. Whether these provisions are properly implemented, as taxpayer always look for ease of business. So we will discuss at length, and we got a learned speaker also. They are going to deliberate the topic with a constitutional validity, whether these provisions are constitutionally valid, or it can be debated at length when it is properly used and when it is not properly used. In my theme presentation, my objective would be to ignite your mind, to penetrate your mind of all the participants, attendees today, so that you get prepared for the topic which we are going to deliberate today at length with a number of judgment, citation, practical example. In my theme presentation, I'm going to touch base 6 important parameters of today's webinar as a theme presentation. If I look at the provision first, inspection, search, and seizure. Inspection provision are being given under section 67. And section 67 says that any proper officer not below the rank of joint commissioner. So this power is given to a senior government official, not below the rank of joint commissioner. He may authorize other officers as well, but for that authorization, there has to be form GST INS 01. Having reason to believe, that is how the provision is being worded, having reason to believe. And what is this reason to believe? All of you will agree with me, this term is so subjective. What is reason to believe in the mind of tax officer, who is a proper officer? To my mind, reason to believe should be supported and substantiated by solid background of the case. It should not be apprehension. Just you are having apprehension that someone is evading the taxes. Apprehension is not reason to believe. There has to be due diligence, proper checking and verification before initiating any inspection, search, and seizure provision. So reason to believe, I was just seeing some of the judgment, and the judgment subtle legal jurisprudence, and you will find divergent judgment also, only on term reason to believe. In my humble submission, this term which is being provided to give wider power in the hands of proper officer should not be used as a mechanical provision in ordinary course of business. It should be used only in exceptional circumstances, duly backed by due diligence, proper checking and verification. Then only such activity like inspection, search, and seizure should be initiated. But the wording of this provision is like that, having reason to believe that any taxpayer, it's suppressing. Suppressing means he's hiding the information. And why he will hide the information? Quite obvious, for the evasion of taxation, no doubt. So he just suppressing, therefore specific situation is being created under section 67 subsection 1 of CGST Act. First is supply of goods or services. So if a taxpayer engage and suppressing supply of goods or services, then inspection can be initiated. So the question, important question would be coming to your mind. What is the meaning of suppression of supply of goods or services? I can take an example of sanitizer. Sanitizer is being disputed whether chargeable at the rate of 12% or 18%, right? Recently, circular got issued and it is being stated it is 18% taxable. So there was interpretation whether sanitizer is a medicament chargeable to 12% or 18%. So my only submission to all of you would be suppression of supply of goods or services, as I understand. If there is taxable value 100 rupees and I'm showing as 80 rupees. That is called separation of supply of goods or services. But anything which is going on interpretation pertaining to HSN or SSC code, classification or rate, and because of that, it cannot be alleged there is separation for supply of goods or services. I'm just giving food for thought. Second situation, stocking goods. So you're stocking, taxpayer stocking goods with an intention, no proper accounting and records kept, evasion of taxation. And third situation is given that taxpayer is availing and claiming ITC, excess claiming of ITC. So two things as an example, there can be number of transaction can be discussed from department perspective. Department may dispute that taxpayer availing credit as per books of accounts, and which is not matching with GSTR 2A or 2B. So department may say you are claiming excess credit because it is not coming in 2A or 2B. Let me clarify to you. These are the term excess claiming ITC. We have to really understand. Like I gave the example, 2A, 2B for availing credit in GSTR 3B. Is there any relevance? Important one. To my mind, there is no relevance as per the GST law as on date. I can substantiate also. For an example, you can say that I'm a supplier and you all are recipient. If I'm supplying goods or services to you, if I have wrongly furnished the GST number of some other party, it will not come in your 2A or 2B, but you're entitled. You can avail credit because you're satisfying 4 conditions under section 16, subsection 2, credit is available. Or maybe I'm capturing B2B supply as a B2C supply, which I could not amend because time limit got expired. Third situation, let's say I'm supplying from Delhi to Maharashtra, interstate IGST leviable, but furnished as a intrastate, C plus S, may not be coming in your 2A or 2B. Or a transaction which I have not furnished in GSTR 1 but paid the taxes by GSTR 3B, even though not coming in 2A or 2B, but credit is available. So can it be termed as an excess claim of ITC? And I can also give you one important provision. As per clause 100, Finance Bill 2021, there's a 5th condition under section 16, subsection 2 going to be inserted. And this subclause AA is very important, which is talking about if recipient and buyer is availing credit on the basis of invoice and debit note raised by the supplier, then such supplier must furnish such invoice and debit note in its GSTR 1. So as it would be coming and auto-populated in 2A, 2B of the recipient. And it must be communicated by supplier to the recipient. And this is prospective clause, yet to be notified. So this 2A or 2B, which is existing as on date, it is only by way of rule. There is no backing of the provision. This backing of the provision now subclause AA, yet to be notified. So I do not find the relevance of 2A or 2B for availing credit. Can it be said that I have excess claim ITC, my books of accounts satisfying 4 conditions under section 16, subsection 2, can it be stated that I have excess claim? To my mind, no. It may be disputed by department that recipient and buyer has availed credit, but his supplier, even after collecting the tax, has not deposited. Can you deny and penalize recipient and buyer who has bona fidely paid the amount to the supplier, supplier defaulted. Can you say that this credit is not available to the recipient? To my mind, and I can say, period prior to GSTR 2A, you cannot allege and penalize the recipient, because this recipient and buyer was not knowing even, because GSTR 2A came sometime in the beginning of 2019, which was supposed to come from July 17. So neither recipient nor the tax department was knowing the supplier even after collecting, not paying the taxes. So period prior to GSTR 2A, recipient can defend his case. But I'm saying, can it be termed as excess claiming of ITC? I'm just giving food for thought example. And last condition, and which you will surprise to note, these are the part of the provision. If there is any contravention of the provision of the act or rules made thereunder, so it is wide power given in the hands of officer to go for inspection, even if there is any contravention of the provision of the act, such wide power given. And in the name of wide power, we are finding these inspections are becoming regular, a new norm of normal business, which should not be the case. Inspection, search, and seizure should be invoked only when you have solid background. Department must be knowing that there is evasion of tax going on, and they have data and background material for substantiation. Lot of judgment in favor of a taxpayer. Without having reason to believe, you cannot go for inspection, search, and seizure. For search and seizure, there are two conditions. There are goods liable for the confiscation. There has to be goods liable for the confiscation. And second, any document, books, or things are being secreted at any place subject to, with an intention to evade taxes. This need to be proved. Then only search and seizure is viable, and that too with the authority of law, like INS 02 for the search, proper form, which we must check. And whenever seizure is being done, properly seized. And if order of provision is being given, then INS 03. So these are the compliances. But I'm telling you, these are the parameters. First point. Second point, summon. Before initiating anything, department is being given power, and any proper officer, and who is proper officer under GST law is being defined under section 2 subsection 91 of CGST Act. Any commissioner or any other officer authorized by him for undertaking the function under the GST Act. Such proper officer can issue a summon. And the summon can be issued to any person, the word used, any person, to enforce attendance of a person or production of document, books, or things. Now, my humble submission, when these summons are being issued for the production of document, books, and things, we are into GST regime where we are filing online return. All the information is available with the department. And whenever we get summoned, we normally find they are asking for the GST return. They are asking copies of relevant invoices. Yes, invoices to certain extent acceptable that they can demand. But such summon should be issued only when they are having proper reason in their mind that they require enforcement, attendance of any person, and to invite any person to be present before them. I have seen the summon is being issued higher up in the authority. They start with the director, CEO, CFO, Why it is being required? You can ask the tax manager to come before you, give the statement and produce the books, document things, whatever you want for your inspection, search and seizure. But the only thing why it is being asked at first go to invite Director of Finance, CEO, CFO, to my mind, these are excessively used and excessively delegated power. Now, for someone it is being stated, and whatever, proceedings is being done before the proper official, it is called judicial proceedings. Under section Indian Penal Code of 193 and 228, judicial proceedings. And such powers are being given like a civil court under Code of Civil Procedure 1908. One precaution you must take, that there is compulsorily mentioning of DIN number, document identification number, and it is coming from CGST department. From CGST perspective, 2 circulars are being issued, circular number 122 and 128. 128 got issued on 23rd December 2019, and it is being stated that all communication which is being sent by CGST officer must have DIN number. Otherwise, that communication, either through an email or a letter or a summon or any so-called notice, should be held as a ultra vires void, null and void. So you must ensure whenever you are getting any documentation, any notice, any email from the CGST department, kindly check whether there is DIN number or not. But we are into one nation, one tax. It is only from CGST perspective. But what about SGST department? When they are issuing some notices, they are sending some kind of summon. Is there any mention of DIN number? So state has not issued such kind of compulsorily quoting of DIN number. Kerala has taken the initiative, but it is supposed to be by all the state, so that we can say it is one nation, one tax. It cannot vary that the central is having some provision and states are having different provision. But that is how the summon which we are referring to. Coming to the third pointer for today's webinar, arrest provision. And you would be knowing and having a lot of news that arrests are now becoming new normal. Whereas arrest supposed to be rarest of rare in exceptional circumstances. If you go to section 69, where power to arrest lies with the commissioner, and commissioner can authorize his officer as well. And how it is being worded, commissioner is having reason to believe, again the one tagline, reason to believe, and which I'm saying reason to believe should not be used in normal sense. You must have information, and that information must be 100% correct. You have some background material, due diligence. It should not be mechanical, ordinary, normal. So whenever you are arresting a person, make sure things are properly checked. And second thing which can be debated, whether arrest can be made without issuance of so-called notice, without passing of assessment order. It can be debated at length, but I'm just giving food for thought. And what is being stated in section 69, if any person, whoever has committed or causes to commit and retaining the benefit, there are 4 offenses, specified offenses under section 132 subsection 1 are liable for the arrest provision. And what are those 4 offenses? And these offenses are: first, supply of goods or services without issuance of invoice. which is called cash sale. You're suppressing. Second, issuance of invoice without supply of goods or services, and which is the case of fake invoice. Only invoice is being issued, but no supply of goods or services. And third, buyer and recipient is taking credit on such invoices, which is wrong availment and utilizing the credit. And last, GST collected but not deposited, fails to pay beyond a period of 3 months from the due date of payment of taxes. So 4 offenses. So if there is any tax evasion, ITC wrongly availed or utilized, or erroneous refund, an amount is exceeding 5 crore, tax amount exceeding 5 crore or more, then this is called non-bailable offense, and it is liable for the imprisonment, which may extend to a period of 5 years plus fine. If amount is less than 5 crore, tax amount I'm referring to. If it is less than 5 crore, then this is called bailable offense. So for 2 to 5 crore, period of imprisonment is 3 years plus fine. If it is 1 to 2 crore, period of imprisonment is 1 year plus fine. For all subsequent offense, period of imprisonment would be 5 years. This is the provision for the arrest. But now I want to ask each one of you, and we have to discuss in today's webinar, learned speaker going to deliberate on the point, whether this arrest provision is constitutionally valid, first of all. If I go to Apex Court judgment, the subtle judgment in the case of D.K. Basu, the subtle legal jurisprudence is before arresting a person, there has to be arrest memo. An arrest memo must cite a reason. For what reason a person is getting arrested? Am I right? And that reason must be communicated to him. And then only he should be brought before the judicial magistrate for remand, for the judicial custody. But such reasons should have solid background. That should not be on the basis of apprehension. But what is happening today? In case of fake invoice, let's take an example. And I'm giving you the example. Let's say there are 3 parties, A, B, and C in a supply chain. And let's say it is C who got the invoice from B. Now, on verification, it has come out that the B has purchased from A. A was only raising invoice, filing GSTR1, but not paying the taxes. B was availing credit because coming in is GSTR2A, and then filing GSTR1 and 3B using the same credit. Now the problem is, how C would be knowing that whatever credit used by the B is a purchase from A and A has not paid the taxes? How C will come to know? And there are a lot of issues, circular trading. And we got many things when we talk about fake invoices. So my only submission, we are arresting C when C does not know that B has purchased from A and A has misled the transaction. To what extent C is responsible? Yes, B is responsible, no denial. Because B could have seen his GSTR2A, but that GSTR2A came only in some early month of 2019. Prior to that, it was not there. So how B is expected to know that A is not paying the taxes, only cutting the invoices? I'm just giving food for thought, and these are very, very important and can be arrested just on the basis of reason to believe, in the tagline reason to believe, that C is a culprit. To my mind, we have a lot of things to deliberate and substantiate. Nevertheless, move next. Parallel proceedings in GST. I know GST is a dual levy center and state. And we are being assigned to a particular department, either central or state. But only humble submission, and which I'm asking all of you, whether for any inspection, search and seizure, both the department can initiate. Under section 6, subsection 2, clause B of CGST Act, there is specific provision. If any proceedings initiated by center, then state should not go, or vice versa. Same proceeding, the word used, same proceedings. So they should not go and overlap each other. I'm giving you 2 examples of my own client, where we have come across this parallel proceedings is going like anything. In one of my client case, first state visited, they checked out, they did inspection, search and seizure, they checked everything, and they have said, yes, there is no tax evasion and you are complying with the law. Then DGGI from central came and started search and seizure for the same subject matter, which was already done by the state officer, and then issued the so-called notice. Is it possible? That is the point which I'm making to all of you. Second case of one of my client, first state started the inspection, then anti-evasion authority came in, and thereafter DGGI came in, and anti-evasion has looked at, let's say, 3 transactions, and DGGI coming looking at the balance 7 transactions, and still there's some transaction left out. I never know. Then a state may once again come back. If this kind of proceedings goes on, then I'm not finding that this is going to help us. This is going to help all of us together. And these parallel proceedings will create unease of business and should be stopped somewhere. It cannot be kept open. Recently, Calcutta High Court, in the case of Raj Metal Industries, has categorically said, when center is already doing the investigation, states should not issue the summon, and they should not initiate any search seizure proceedings. But we are finding divergent judgment also. What is the meaning of same proceedings? It is on transaction. I may have 100 transactions. Can it be categorized and bucket that for 5 transactions center will do, and for 5 transactions state will do, and we never know, 90 transactions again and again they will come back? And this is not the case. If someone who has initiated, let him check everything, whatever you want to do, but should not create unease of business. So parallel proceedings, another subject matter, to what extent it is constitutionally valid. I given you divergent judgment existing today, but still under section 6, subsection 2, clause B, I given my submission to you that for same proceedings, both cannot start, center and state cannot start parallel proceedings. If parallel proceedings exist, then that is going to be contrary with the provision of the Act and will create unease of business. Having said that, the important aspect, 5th item, recently I have seen one Supreme Court judgment, and which you would be knowing, in the case of Parambir Singh Saini versus Baljit Singh and others, and very important judgment. And what is that judgment, you know? It is being stated there would be installation of CCTV camera at offices of all investigation agencies like DRI, police station. An Honorable Apex Court has demanded a report from Principal Secretary of all state whether they have installed the CCTV camera where interrogation is being done, arrests are being made. In my humble submission, it must be done for all investigation authority under GST as well, be it for center like anti-evasion, DGGI, or maybe state. Why can't they put up the CCTV camera? Recently, yesterday night, I got a call from a client, and what is the call? Listen very carefully. A person who is a chartered accountant, and he's being summoned, and after getting summoned, he has gone and appeared before the authority. What authority is doing for last 2 days, he's being detained in the office of DGTI. He's not officially arrested. Now, my humble submission, I do not know what kind of proceedings are going on. He's being detained for last 2 days. In what context he's being detained? Either he should be arrested. In case you feel like he's the person, he is in connivance with the taxable person, taxpayer, you arrest him. But you can't detain for 2 continuous days in your office. Is it possible that the investigation officer goes for search and seizure, stay back at the residence for 2 nights, where all the family members, including wife and mothers, are there in the home, and they are staying back 2 nights? Gujarat High Court has come heavily on them and said, how come it is possible? And even I'm asking so. But since I'm saying chartered accountant, I want to alarm here. Section 132, subsection 1 is now putting rider. And you have seen a lot of, cases wherein professionals are being captured, arrested. And it is coming out from provision of section 132. Whoever has committed, that may be a taxpayer. But who causes to commit and retaining benefit, so all professional need to be little alert enough now. We should create a basic protection for ourselves, firewall for ourselves, so that we should not get into a trap of causes to commit and retaining benefit. Otherwise, you have seen a lot of cases where we are hearing that professionals are being arrested. We have to be careful. And similar provision for arrest and fine, even for the person who causes to commit and retaining the benefit. Last of my today's theme presentation, and just to ignite your mind. Search and seizure, I do know that this is happening so widely. These provisions are being made to check tax evasion. It was never meant to harass the honest taxpayer. I do agree search and seizure provision must be initiated against the person who are evading the taxes. And this reason to believe must be used in proper sense, in realistic sense, in right and spirit. But things are going little contrary. I'm sorry to say that. And in this process, lot of honest taxpayers are being harassed. There may be a dispute that an honest taxpayer is having his own interpretation of law. Maybe he's having own interpretation and classification, hence applying the corresponding rate. He's claiming ITC because he's bona fide, claiming after satisfying 4 conditions of section 16, subsection 2. Can you penalize him in the name of that 2A or 2B? I'm only giving food for thought, and just one judgment of Madras High Court. What happened during the search and seizure? One person had accepted the liability, whereas he was not agreeing. But during search and seizure, under stress and duress, sometimes you accept the liability. And it is always demanded that you must pay some component of tax liability there and there itself. He deposited 1 crore rupees. There was 2 crore rupees liability was finalized. And later on, this taxpayer coming out and saying, no, there's no liability exists. Whatever 1 crore rupees I have paid under stress and duress. It is nowhere my liability. So what to be done? There are 2-3 questions coming out to my mind. Whether statement can be retracted, which he has given, but for sure he's saying under stress and duress, coercion. He has deposited 1 crore, whether department can collect any tax at the time of search and seizure. Under which provision of the Act? Which provision of the Act is supporting to collect the tax amount? And it is not a tax amount as per the taxpayer. And third, what is the way forward? How we can resolve such issues? One Madras High Court judgment, Sri Nandi Dhal Mills Company Limited, and very good judgment. The 1 crore rupees which is deposited during search and statement was stated to be, yes, my liability, but as you know, under stress and coercion, later on this taxable person has retracted his own statement and wrote to the department, this liability does not exist. And whatever you have collected, you must refund back the money. And case has gone to Madras High Court. And what Honorable Madras High Court has held in this case, that whatever money collected during search and seizure is not authorized by the law. If at all we assume it's a fraud case under Section 74 of CGST Act. So under Section 74, subsection 5, there's a provision either on own ascertainment by the taxable person or ascertained by the proper officer. This tax may be demanded along with interest and 15% penalty, but that has to be accepted by the taxable person. He is not agreeing to. And what Honorable Madras High Court further said, when this taxable person was giving all information to the department, supporting, providing all information, then department could have issued the so-cause notice. But they could not have collected this amount in the name of advance tax, which taxable person is not agreeing to. And this 74 subsection 5 is not the provision. Own ascertainment, either taxable person should ascertain his liability or ascertain by the proper officers. This is not the case. And section 73 subsection 7, if proper officers saying liability exists and it is not accepted by the taxable person, then they are supposed to issue a so-cause notice, and that should have been done. But without doing so-cause notice, collecting the tax amount, which is not the tax amount, this should be stopped somewhere. But nevertheless, it was theme presentation. We got all learned speakers to deliberate their topic at length. So I was thinking to just ignite your mind, get you prepared for today's webinar so that you can apply your mind and enjoy today's session. So with this, let me sum up my theme presentation, thanking each one of you. I got 558 participants as of now for this webinar. And we are going to discuss all these important components: inspection, search, seizure, arrest, recovery, provisional assessment. We are going to discuss at length. So with this, let me say thanks to each one of you for your patient listening. Thank you very much. Handing over to Dr. S.P. Sharma.
Thank you very much, Chairman sir, for a very, very comprehensive viewpoint and many suggestions for the growth and development of the economy and to make it more and more good and simple tax going forward. So now I would request you once again that you moderate the session and invite the panelists according to the schedule. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Sharma. Now, without taking much time, let me invite first Mr. Shibam Mehta from Lakshmi Kumaran and Sridharan to make his presentation. So, Mr. Shibam, I'm not giving any introduction because I know most of us know you. He's from Lakshmi Kumaran Sridharan, but apart from that, he's one of the dynamic and energetic indirect tax and GST expert. So, Mr. Shibam, for your presentation.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Just before I start sharing my screen, an excellent introduction which you have given. And you have made my task easy by actually igniting the audience. I will use the word igniting. You not only share your thoughts, you have ignited the audience. I can see the question box wherein they are asking questions about arrest. I mean, Though ideally the order would have been search, seizure, summon, attachment of property and arrest. But since you have focused too much of arrest, and if you are right in saying there is a lot of arrests happening in GST, I'll just show you the numbers also. But yeah, thanks for. So we will start with the word arrest, when they can arrest, and also I'll touch upon constitutional validity of arrest provisions. Without wasting too much on time on the other aspects, I'll just start with what is understood as arrest. Sir, I'll like your inputs also. I have one question which I've left open. Maybe I'll pause there and I'll ask your inputs on that, because you have ignited a good topic, and it's a definitely a one topic which has been a pain point in GST. I'll say since 2018, numerous writ petitions are filed. Matter has gone to Supreme Court, came back, etc. A lot of things happening in this. So I'll want your attention, and I'll also ask one simple question. Maybe simple for you, maybe difficult for me. So okay, so just to what you said, sir, before wasting too much of time, recently, like you were talking about so many cases, I just got some numbers for the audience. In financial year 2021, I'm talking about the year where we were hit by COVID, there were 8,000 cases which DGCI has booked. There was 35,000 crores of ITC, fake ITC invoices cases, more than 400 people arrested, and out of that 14 were professionals, so CA, lawyers, all directors, etc. So that's the number for the previous financial year. This financial year we have just started, and we already have 24 arrests which has taken place. We have already seen cases involving 1,200 entities. Some notable ones, it's not that particular DGGI is doing it, it's actually happening all across India. So we have High Court judgments right from south till north, so it's happening all across India. It's not that only one location they are focusing on. Just to give you a brief introduction of how it has been happening. Mind you, these numbers are with COVID pressure, wherein we had certain lockdown, etc. People were not able to work properly, staying at home, and this is when this has happened. But this is what the fact is, and like you rightly said, it has become a new norm to simply arrest the person and then start the proceedings. With this, without wasting too much of time on the provisions, because Mr. Vimal Jain has already spoken about the provision, the Section 69 of the CGST Act gives the power to the commissioner. However, he has a reason to believe, though he has deliberated too much upon it, but I will also touch upon this reason to believe. These words are very, very crucial. They are impregnated with meaning. Each word has a meaning to attach to it, and I'll touch upon that. So broadly, when can the arrest can happen? If you are guilty of these 4 offences, which are listed down in Section 132. So Section 69 says if a person has committed, where the commissioner has a reason to believe that you have committed these offences, then he may either arrest himself, and where it is below 2 or between 2 crore to 5 crore, he can authorize the officer to arrest. So that's what broadly the structure is. And all these, in fact, the first 3 clauses broadly talks about cases wherein you have first talks about clandestine removal of the goods. That is, you have removed the goods, not paid the tax, not raised the invoice. That's the first situation. Second is wherein the invoice has been issued, but there is no supply. So again, it is talking about fake invoices like which Vimal Jain was pointing upon. And third is availment of the input tax credit without the invoice or on the basis of the fake invoices. So first 3 are clearly the cases of tax evasion, fake invoices, etc. Fourth is interestingly a very different provision. It has been understood very differently by the court or by the authorities, and court have brought some meaning to it. And the fourth is collects any tax from the assessee but do not pay to the government within a period of 3 months. So fourth is slightly different, but still it is it's again a situation where you have collected the tax and pocketed in with you. You have not paid to the government. It's something which is you are supposed to pay to the government, but you have not paid. So the crucial words are such payments becomes due. Fails to pay. You are liable to pay, but you fail to pay. That's important. I'll come back to this in a little more detail. There are other offences, not that relevant for the purpose of this discussion. So I'll stick to what 69 says. Now, where they can arrest you, as Mr. Bimal Jain pointed out, if the offense is 2 crores and above, and if the offenses are of these four nature, they can invoke section 69 and they can invoke the arrest provision. There are other offenses or there are areas which is under 132 which do not give them the power to arrest, but definitely once proved against you, there are sentences which can be up to 1 year, 6 months, and so on. So that's broadly how the prosecution and the arrest provisions operate in the GST law. Now, first question. Now, this is very, very important topic, and this is what I think everybody should be very, very clear about is, can adjudication and criminal prosecution go hand in hand, or they have to first close the adjudication and then initiate the criminal prosecution? What I mean to say is I will give some examples in the form of the case laws, and then I will come on the question as to what is the law in the GST. Now, before I go too much into this, let me just broadly tell you this famous case of Make My Trip. Now, in this case, what happened is MMT was, as you all know, is in the business of booking hotels, etc. They were collecting hotel charges and service tax on the hotel services from various customers through their hotel. And the same, they were paying it to the hotel after retaining the commission which they were entitled to. On the commission, they were regularly paying service tax. But this amount which they were remitting to the hotel, there was allegations that the hotels are not paying those taxes. So on this pretext, the investigation, etc., started against MMT. And what ultimately happened was the vice president of the company was arrested, and he was forced that you pay 40 crores of the tax if you want us to grant you any bail. So that's the background of the case. They were regularly paying their own taxes on the commission. They were filing the returns. No allegation whatsoever ever against MMT. Only point out was that the amount which you have collected as service tax, you have collected that amount as tax but not paid to the government. Therefore, you are covered under D clause. So I'm talking about service tax provisions, which were similar, or I'll say identical to what we have now in GST. Now that was a question. The assessee argued, the first question which he argued is, if you want to arrest me, first come issue me a show cause notice, make sure that I am liable to any penalty or fine, etc. Once you are able to prove that yes, I have evaded the tax, then only you can arrest me. That was the first question, or one of the arguments which the assessee took before the Delhi High Court. Delhi High Court agreed to that submission. They said, without the commencement of adjudication proceedings, without a show cause, investigating authority cannot go ahead straight away and merely on the basis of suspicion of evasion of service tax, you cannot go away straight away and ask for the arrest. You cannot arrest them. However, if you are satisfied that he has committed an offense, then you give him an opportunity of him being heard. You bring him, you tell him these are the materials and the circumstances which you have gathered against you. If you are not, and ask him to prove that you are one of them who have actually committed an offense, and then you can go ahead and arrest them. But so basically what the High Court held, this judgment of High Court, Delhi High Court, though in the context of this tax, why I am referring to, it has played a lot of importance in GST subsequent decisions also. The High Court held, see, normally, immediately, you cannot normally arrest a person. What you can arrest him only upon the completion of the adjudication proceedings. So once you have found him liable to penalty, and the adjudication is complete by issuing a show cause, etc., then only you can arrest the person. In other words, what they said is first determine whether he is liable to pay the tax to the government or not. Then only you can arrest him. However, if you feel that the offense is so grave and you have qualitative evidence available with you, then you can definitely go ahead with this, I will say, exceptional step of detention. But that can only be if you are very, very clear that he may delay the adjudication proceedings, the offense is grave, the qualitative evidence are against him, then only you can go ahead and arrest him. This is basically the arrest under section 69 or under the earlier laws. is not arrest in that sense to make him go behind the bar for the fraud which he has committed. It is basically a preventive detention. He is detained so that he do not interfere with the inquiry proceedings, etc. That's what the idea is. And that is what clearly was held by Delhi High Court. In fact, they also created an exception. They said if there is a person who has been a habitual offender, he has not filed service tax at all, or he is somebody who if you feel he will run away, he will flew away from the country, then definitely you can go ahead and take these coercive measures against him. But that too, you should have a convincing justification in the notes to the files that this is the reason why I am detaining him. That's what the High Court held, and the matter went to the Supreme Court. And in the service tax regime, in fact, this judgment of High Court was affirmed by the Supreme Court. So that was a law in pre-GST. When the same judgments in subsequent High Courts were quoted, rather, it's an interesting case of Telangana High Court, wherein the MD was issued summons, and he was issued summon twice. He did not appear. Third summon was issued. So generally, when the summon is issued, if you do not appear for 3 times, they generally say if you do not appear for the 3rd time, we will arrest you. Against that threat of arrest, he filed a writ petition before the High Court, saying that please give me the protective order that they do not arrest me during the summon proceedings itself. But in this case, what was interesting was the department has sufficient evidence against him, which proved that he was guilty of taking the credit on the basis of the fake invoices as well as passing it on. And the amount involved was among us. It was 225 crores, which he has done it. And that was what the department allegation in before the High Court. That's what it has happened in this case. Now, interestingly, when the assessee or the petitioner tried to take reliance from Make My Trip, that was not agreed by the High Court in this case. Rather, they went ahead and they said that the search and arrest is an aid and support to the main function of levy and collection. So if the government has to levy and collect the taxes, the search and the arrest provisions are intended to aid and support them. That was the first observation of the High Court. Then they also went ahead and said that if you are asking for assessment before the prosecution, the kind of offences for which he is guilty is fake invoices, etc. Where is the question of assessment there? The very nature of these offences is something which do not require completion of assessment. If the case is brought against him that he has taken credit or passed on the credit based on fake invoices, where is the question of not completing the assessment and then detaining that person? That was rather that's what High Court held in this order. In fact, High Court didn't stop there because it was one of its kind before High Court in the GST regime. They also admitted that at the nascent stage, there are a lot of technical glitches, etc. Numbers of circulars are issued by the government. But at that stage of GST, if somebody tries to take benefit of a new law and try to project sales based on the paper transaction, there is nothing wrong by where the government should detain him, arrest him, and the government, first of all, the government should not be deprived of what is due to them. That's what the observation of the court was. Rather, they said if the kind of act which is complained against this person is a threat to the implementation of the new law itself. That was the observation. They said it's a new law. He is using the new law. He's trying to figure out his means to make money. That should not be allowed. And they said there is no question of completing the assessment and then detaining him or arresting him. That was the observation of the High Court. Rather, similar circumstances happened in another Gujarat High Court. It's a very, very detailed order, very good, very beautifully written order. In this, rather, I'll talk about this case wherein they were summoned. They asked for time period that I do not want to appear. Give me 1 week of extension. And they again, similar to the previous case, they filed a petition and asked for the protection that coercive step of arrest should not be taken. Again, the SSC took the same plea, what was there in the previous High Court judgment, that similar to Make My Tip, in this case also, you should not go ahead and they should not arrest me straight away. What they should do is they should first assess me. They should see whether I have paid the taxes, filed the return. They said there is no notice. I have been filing regular returns. There has been no notice from the government that I have not complied with the law. Straightforward, they cannot come and arrest me. So give me protection that and tell them not to take a coercive step of arrest when I come and appear for the summons. That was the observation of the, or rather, that was the or contention of the assessee. Now, in this case also, the High Court decided not to follow make my trial principle. That is, they said adjudication proceedings and criminal proceedings can go hand in hand. Rather, they tried to find out different chapters of the GST Act. They said 69 falls in an area wherein we are talking about inspection, search, seizure, and arrest. 132 talks about offense and penalty. They both operate in the different fields. So the 132 cannot be the reason to not arrest the person right now. And they also said the reference of 132 in 69, that is the type of offenses they have mentioned, it is only talking about the nature of offenses. They need not have to prove that the person has actually committed that offense or not. That's what the observation of the court. And they said arrest can happen before the adjudication proceeding. So on one side, I have make my trip, pre-GST. On the other side, I have these two high courts, which never followed or they refused to follow make my trip. At the same time, it's not that in the GST we don't have judgments which do not follow the principle of make my trip. Rather, this is third case I'm talking about. Here, the facts were slightly different. In this case, a lot of statements were recorded. All the documents or huge documents were called for. Assessee went again and again and again and submitted those documents. Even the statements of not only the MD, all the person, like Mr. Jain was talking about, MD is usually called upon. He was also called upon and he went there and made the statement. Whatever was asked for, he provided that. Now, in this case, again, because there was a fear of arrest when they were going and attending the summons, the assessee again filed a writ petition saying that the coercive step should not be taken, that I should be arrested when I go, or they should not arrest me during these proceedings. This is one of the cases in GST. Now, this is where the confusion starts. Now, this is one of the cases in GST wherein High Court said, hold on, let's see what section 132 says. 132 says is, actually 132 starts with what? It says a person who has committed the offenses listed down there under. So they said, first you fix what is the act he has committed, whether or not he has committed that offense or not. The word used in this section is committed an offense. Therefore, before arresting, first find out whether he is guilty of the act which is mentioned under 132 or not. That can happen only once you have done the assessment. Once you have completed the assessment of the person and you found him guilty of an offense, then you can go ahead and arrest the person. So there is a huge difference in the first two high courts and what this high court held. They said, no, in no way you can arrest a person without first fixing a liability against him. That's what the Madras High Court held. And lastly, I'm trying to find out two different type of judgments. What's the difference? And then I'll stop for everyone to really think what could be the reason of not following. Now, this is another case wherein the assessee was called upon. There was search, seizure which was conducted, etc. And one of the petitioner was already arrested and he was already in the judicial custody. The other was also called upon. Now, in this case also, the assessee argued. Now, it was a case wherein the case was he has taken the credit based on the fake invoices, exported the goods, etc., and tried to claim the refund of the input tax. So that was the allegation against the assessee. This is a Punjab Haryana High Court judgment. I'm not going too much into facts, but that was broadly, again, similar principle. Now here, the question again was, one of the argument was, first complete my assessment and then arrest me. Again, High Court held the same. They followed MMT. They gave another reason to that. The same reason what they were given in the previous High Court judgment, they gave another reason. They said, if you look at the section 69 or 132, they fix the sentence based on the amount of tax evasion. Like Mr. Jan was also pointing out, 5 crore or 2 crores to 5 crores. That's the monetary limit. So based on the monetary limit, you decide whether he has committed an offense and whether he can be arrested or not. If that is so, where is the question of arresting a person before identifying what is the quantum of tax evasion done by him? If you have not done the assessment, you cannot identify what is the taxable value which he has evaded. If therefore, you should complete the assessment and then go ahead and arrest the person. Now, here I like to stop and take views from Mr. Jain and all the other speakers or the participants, just to know what could be the reasons or what plays in the mind of the High Court when these type of cases come. Sir, you want to add? I mean, I think I've tried to give a very simple examples, live examples, try to correlate it. You want to add why it is happening? I mean, one side High Court is saying, in fact, one of the High Courts, there was also argument that GST law is separate, service tax law is separate. There was also an argument the provisions are not same. To my mind, the provisions are pari material. So, I mean, there is no difference whatsoever. Maybe a difference in the quantum, I'm sure, but no other reason. So, you want to add why there is a difference in the view? What could be the reason?
Mr. Subham,
Sir.
To my mind, what looks like, see, when we talk about arrest provision, section 69, and which is talking about 4 specified offenses of section 132.
Yes.
Logically, if you look at, it is starting with whoever has committed. So there has to be proved that it got committed. And quantum of tax is very important factor for the arrest provision.
Correct.
For the non-bailable offense. And quantum can be determined only when so-cause notice is being issued and assessment is being done. Just on the basis of apprehension, I'm just giving an example. In supply chain, I gave one example of fake invoice, wherein A has only raised the invoice and not paid the taxes. He has filed GSTR1, not 3B. So after filing GSTR1, 2A for B got generated. B has used the same credit for discharging his output tax when he's raising invoice to C. Now, when you are defending a case of C, these questions going to be very important. To what extent C should be penalized? Even C was not knowing that B is procuring something from A and A is not paying the taxes. Second, quantum is very, very important. Unless this quantum, now we have to look at the quantum which is coming in the hands of C. Maybe C again raising invoice to D, and it is going on in the supply chain. So my only submission coming out, what happened, different High Court judgment coming out, you will agree with me, which is not written in the law, but whenever we argue before the authority, sometime authority gets convinced with one argument. And sometimes even you are correct and giving your argument, but still authority is somewhat not agreeing to your argument. So they distinguish or differ from you. So I do not find why 2 other judgment is not being considered on a point which was considered in last 2 judgment, but still I'm of the view, in my humble submission, that unless you quantify, unless you prove committed, can you initiate arrest provision? That would be my humble submission.
You are right in one sense, while rather I appreciate the use of the words type of case. You use the word type of case, right? So I'm not on reason to believe right now. You're talking about type of case it is. Now, if you really look at what is this section 69, what point I'm trying to drive home is section 69 is it's actually a custodial interrogation department is asking for, right? It's not something that they're asking you to, they are not penalizing you for the offense done under 132. No, that is 5 years jail, right? That is 5 years jail or 2 years jail, whatever it is. That can only happen. So if you are committed of an offense, which is under 132, then that can only happen once the proceedings have been completely finished. Assessment proceedings have been finalized, case has been made against you, you have been found guilty of an offense. Here we are talking about preventive detention. Now, if you are talking, like somebody was mentioning in the chat box while you were talking, in fact, yesterday I was doing a GST trading, GST training, one person asked, and training was with your last organization where you were employed, right? One of the persons stopped this presentation, and in the end we were asking about questions. He said, every day, sir, we read about the news, people evading tax, huge crore of money going here and there. Our hard-earned money is going. What is government doing about it? I said, no, it's not the truth. There are a lot of investigation happening. People are being detained. The purpose, rather, of 69 is to ensure that they have sufficient control over these type of offenses. That's why they have actually, if you look at the nature of offenses they have selected for 69, there are list of offenses under 132, which I never showed to everybody. We were only talking about 4. Once this investigation starts and the person is not cooperating at all, there is no harm in detaining them. You can't say, I will wait for the adjudication proceeding to conclude and thereafter I will arrest the person. By the time he may flew off. You can't control. Yes, sir, please.
Mr. Shibam, I'm not saying that the person who is not helping the authority for their investigation. I'm only defending a person who is helping them, providing all information to him, and still you're detaining him. So now allow me to complete my part. And second, you say that section 69 is only referring to the nature of offense. And they are not putting kind of committed or quantification. But my only submission would be, that is the point I'm raising again and again. We cannot give such excessive power in the hands of officers in the name of region to believe. Unless they prove, there should be some counter responsibility. See, if a person, honest taxable person got detained for 60 days, and let's say, I'm just giving food for thought to all the audience, and you detained just because you wanted to have protection for your investigation and inquiry. But 99%, I can tell you, Mr. Shibam, as per my experience, department knows who is at fault. Who is at fault. So in the name of region to believe, they should not penalize someone who is ready and willing, providing the information, giving the information. And in my provisional attachment presentation later at the last, I will cite some judgment wherein it was considered just because you have initiated inspection and it is going on, and you can provisionally attach the bank account, is not possible.
On provisional attachment, I will come back. But so again, we have stick to one word, reason to believe, right? I have not touched that. I'll take your inputs there also. Only what I'm saying is the fact in all the cases wherein there is a case of interestingly in the high courts wherein the high court differed, I mentioned it as a fact that department was able to prove with a sufficient evidence that he was doing circular trading. There was a sufficient evidence with the department, and then he was not attending the summons at all. See, what was the difference? He was not attending. In the first 2 cases, I intentionally mentioned that there was no reason to increase the number of slides. Actually, I wanted to point out, the whole idea was, he was issued 2 summons, he never came. 3rd summon, he said, wait, if you don't come, I'll arrest you. Department has sufficient evidence that he has evaded tax of 225 crores. And he was involved in the paper trading. That was the first case. Second case, again, he was trying to do that. In those cases, you cannot simply have a plea that, sir, you please close your assessment proceedings and then arrest me. Rather,
no. I agree. I'm not differing from your statement. I'm not differing.
In fact, I will tell you the illustrative situation. I've read some high courts. These are the cases wherein these powers generally they exercise, and they are correct to do it also. If you are an originator of a fake invoice, you are talking about D. What about A? He should be arrested.
Yeah.
He should be arrested at a first go.
Yes.
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 Right?
if he's a habitual offender, if he has been doing it in the excise regime also, in fact, in one of the chat box, somebody was saying, excise में भी ऐसा होता था, तो वो भी पकड़े जाते थे, कोई वो भी नहीं छूटते थे, उनको भी, if he's a habitual offender, he should be thrown behind the bars. But that doesn't mean, I'm not saying he should be left in the jail for 5 years. I'm not saying that. I'm only saying during the investigation, by what are the type of cases wherein they do not have to wait for adjudication proceedings to conclude. If there is an evasion of a huge tax amount, अब किसी का 300 करोड़ का evasion है, उसने 300 करोड़ की circular trading कर दी, उसके total asset 50 करोड़ के नहीं है, and he is not cooperating also, he do not have a permanent business also, अब वो भाग जाएगा, he will flew away, you will never be able to catch him. So in this type of cases, they are, so you can't, वहां पे अगर कोई लॉयर जाके जज को बोले सर एडजुडिकेशन खत्म कराओ, तब मैं देखूंगा.
शिवम मैंने कतई नहीं कहा, and I'm again saying that those who are habitual offenders, those who are not supporting,
Correct.
those who are not providing the information, I'm not taking their side.
And
I'm not taking their side.
Also where we come to reason to believe, also you have a concrete documentary evidence. I'm totally with you.
Yeah.
Reason to believe पे आया नहीं सर, अभी उसके बाद इस पे I'll come back to you so that I complete my presentation. आपका well taken.
टाइम पॉज है, मैं भी ज्यादा इसमें नहीं जाना चाहता, बट एक लाइन जरूर बोल के हटना चाहूंगा कि जहां पे हैबिचुअल ऑफेंडर है, जो सपोर्ट नहीं कर रहा, जो आपके एविडेंस को डिस्ट्रॉय कर सकता है, वहां पे आई एम नॉट टेकिंग देयर साइड, आई एम टेकिंग द साइड ऑफ दोज हु आर ऑनेस्ट and the department is not having any concrete proof against them. I given the example of Madras High Court. See, Nandi Dhal Mills Company Limited, where 1 crore rupees got collected. So my clear distinction is, you take action against those who are habitual, not supporting, not giving the information. But do not take the action against those who are supporting, giving the information and clarifying their position.
Rather, in these high courts, you see, they are proving, I have a fixed place of establishment, I've employed so many people, I have been there, I've been a sterling manufacturer since so many years. Today, you have found me against some fake invoices, you cannot arrest me. Court said you're right. That is on the reason to believe. What was the reason to believe for the officer? I'll come back to that. That's why I'm saying I'm not touched upon reason to believe, interestingly, because in my topic, you said adjudication versus criminal. So they can go hand in hand depending upon case to case. That was the point which, and it's a preventive detention. It is not, you have committed for an offense, you will be thrown behind bars. It's not penalizing you or, arresting you for that or sentencing you for that 5 years. It's not that. It's only for investigation that tool is given to them. On that point, coming to next, and this is more interesting than the previous one. There are cases wherein once you have caught hold of a person, he's behind bars. You have taken whatever statements you want to take. 2 हफ्ता हो गया, 3 हफ्ता हो गया, 3 months हो गए. There are cases 3 months हो गए. Now he's still behind the bars. And in one of the cases, like this case, and it's an exceptional case. I read the cases. I thought I'll pick the facts so that audience can drive home the points. The raid was conducted in 2019. They had 2 years to get whatever information they want. There was nothing on the record to show that he has not actually helped in the investigation. Though he was committed of the same offense of fraudulent ITC, because you have to be covered under 1 to D. Let's understand that. He said, okay, that's what has been happening. Now from January till the date where order was passed, 3 weeks, he was still lying in the judicial custody. The assessee went to the court saying, please grant me bail. Now, what court understood is, now what Mr. Jain was talking about, it has become a new normal. That is wrong. The section 69 is only a preventive detention provision. You cannot keep him in jail till the proceedings are finalized. The purpose is to gather the information, ensure that you are able to conclude the investigation. In this case, Bombay High Court said the court is not even under trial stage. You have not submitted the documents and you are continuing to detain the petitioner. You raided him in 2019. You recorded a statement of him. 2 years passed. You were waiting for these 2 years, no action taken by you. Now suddenly in January you found evidences against him and you detained him. And since 3 weeks he is lying in the judicial interrogation. What for? How long will you keep him? And there are n number of cases in GST I have seen wherein the assessee was first arrested, went to jail, investigation going on and on and on, and no charge sheet filed, nothing. Proceedings of 132 must be concluded. You cannot keep him in the jail for the lifetime or for 5 years. So their court said you have to strike a fine balance between custodian and interrogation and right of personal liberty of the person. Because what we are talking about is right of a personal liberty of the person which is being hampered by your action. You cannot do it. If you have sufficient evidence, you have to grant him bail. That was one of the cases. Again, another case, another High Court, Delhi High Court. The main accused was on regular bail. He was co-accused. He was still lying in the jail. His bank account was seized, etc. Everything done. You have sufficient safeguards to get the revenue which you want to get. He filed an anticipatory bail saying, "Sir, mujhe to chhod do. You have attached my bank account. You have enough capacity to recover the money for the government." There also they said there is a question of detaining him for so long. This section is a preventive detention. Once the search is concluded, you are done with your investigation, everything, you should release him. What generally court looks at is if he's cooperating with the investigation, if he's not tampering with the evidence, he's not trying to intimidate any witnesses. If you have a fear, they may ask you to deposit the passport before the court, or they may say that if you leave the country, you have to inform the authorities. In these type of cases, generally the bail is also granted. So that sums the understanding of 69 and 132. 132 actually requires completion of assessment proceedings. 169 is again a question of fact. What is a case in hand? What a department has made a case against you? Can there be a coercive step against you? That brings me to the next, rather last topic on this before I touch upon constitutional validity. There also, Jain Saab, I want your attention. अभी आप कुछ और पढ़ने लगे, मैसेज वगैरह मैंने देख लिया. अभी मैं छोड़ने नहीं वाला हूँ. आपने you have ignited the audience. I'll not let you go. अब रीजन टू बिलीव पे आते हैं. आप जो बोल रहे थे ना, एक वर्ड हाईकोर्ट से की लैंग्वेज बोलते हैं. देखिए उन्होंने क्या बोला. फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल, रीजन टू बिलीव का मतलब क्या होता है? Reason means you should have a cause and justification. Believe means you should accept or you should have a complete faith in it. You should have absolutely clear documentation why you have formed an opinion that that person is guilty of circular trading, fake invoice, taking the credit without invoice, supplying the goods without payment of taxes. What is the reason? That should be very, very clear. It should not be based on some haphazard information. It should not be based on hearsay. It should be, this power should be used sparingly, not to harass the assessee, not to cause any detrimental effect to the business of the assessee, because many courts have also realized if you are a normal taxpayer running an industry, once you arrest the MD or a director, there can be unemployment of the employees also. You can't exercise this power like this. So you should have an absolute reason of belief. Like in Make My Trip, 40 crores were refunded back to them. They said, I'm regularly paying service tax return. And also they didn't, in fact, Make My Trip also let down certain very, very clear in understanding. It cannot be exercised where the issue is of a technical nature. It cannot be exercised where there is an interpretation of law involved. It cannot be exercised where there is a difference of opinion. Classification case you were referring to, sir, sanitizer. There is a question of arrest. You have never, so if the understanding, my understanding is my product is in the nature of medicament. Your understanding is no, it is not a medicament. You issue me a show cause notice. You tell me why you feel so. Let me submit my details. There are a whole lot of Supreme Court decisions on similar products calling it as a medicament. There is a difference of opinion. You cannot arrest them. Sorry, you cannot. That's what high courts have repeatedly held. You cannot arrest a person to induce a fear in his mind for unreasonable demands. That's very, very clear. You cannot arrest them and tell them to pay the money or I will not or you will not be granted bail. That cannot be done. You should have sufficient reasons. On these reasons, two more important points, and others should also please note that the words are reasons to believe. It is different from these reasons to record. So while they are arresting you, there should be reasons which are recorded in their file. They need not tell you the reasons what it is. But that doesn't mean that if he is challenged in the court of law, or if it is challenged that he do not have sufficient evidence, he should not be in a position to disclose that material. So that should be a proper noting in the file why commissioner or other officers feel that or has a reason to believe that he has committed those four offenses, and what are the evidences, what are the documents which they have gathered, what are the statements which clearly depicts that he is mastermind or he is the one who has committed the offense. If you have so, then definitely, and if you feel this person has a capacity of interfering in the investigation, etc., definitely the power can be exercised. All these reasons should be recorded, not merely for the purpose of extracting money. Many a time, at night you get a call, sir, मेरा classification का issue है, वो बोल रहे arrest कर लेंगे. अब sometimes you also get irritated, करने दो यार, उसको बोलो आप करना है तो करो. If you can do it, you do. But that doesn't mean you know my product is correctly classified under 18. You have been paying 5 intentionally. You have an advice from a lawyer or a chartered accountant saying, sir, आप गलत कर रहे हो. You ignore that advice and continue to clear under file. Now, these are not the cases of interpretation. This is not a case of difference of opinion. This is the intention. Though these are not covered under 4 cases we are talking about, definitely. These are the cases wherein you can be acquitted. I mean, you cannot say that this is a question of interpretation. That thought process should be very, very clear. With this last topic I'll talk about is the constitutional validity. Now, without going into too much detail, as you all know, GST derives power from Article 246A. Now, 246A gives power to the Parliament and the Legislature to make laws with respect to goods and service tax. Now, the question which came before Delhi High Court and in other High Courts, this issue was raised was whether or not they have power under 246A to make laws in respect of, where they say with respect to goods, whether they have powers to make law, which is well covered under the criminal law, whether they have power to make law with regard to arrest and prosecution or not. That was the question which was raised. Sir, what is your view on that?
I will request Shivam to complete your presentation because, other speakers are already standing.
It's a very, very debatable question. What High Court has held, I tell you that, they said power to make laws with respect to is a very, very wide term, particularly because GST is getting powers from 246A. It is not dependent upon the list 1, list 2, list 3. So this power is very wide. With respect to has to be construed very, very widely. It will also include powers to make allied laws relating to arrest and prosecution. They also said if it's pith and substance, there is something called pith and substance, then the main objective of the law is to levy and collect the tax. Power to arrest and prosecute are incidental to this power. So they do have power under 246A. Even if they don't have, they can trace the power under the criminal law, which is under list 3. That is what they held. But interestingly, power to arrest or prosecute, not only under the GST, under the customs, under other laws, under MLT, Money Laundering Act, and other laws, this question is pending before Supreme Court, whether they have powers to have something which is otherwise falling under the other entry of the Constitution, whether they are exercising. Even the GST is tagged in that. That is going to be listed on 26 July in Supreme Court. And this is GST will be one of the areas. It is customs, as I said, there are many other laws wherein this question has been raised. So maybe we have to wait for Supreme Court to answer that. And with this, I'll conclude my presentation. Thank you so much. Thank you, sir. It was, as usual, I like to have that dialogue with you somehow because
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Take care, stay safe.
Thank you.
For excellent presentation, Mr. Sivam. Next, I would like to invite Mr. Sudipta Bhattacharya. Are you there, Sudipta? Okay, all right. He's there. So again, I will say that these stalwarts do not require any introduction, who they are. So everyone knows about them, that they are all dynamic and energetic GST expert as on date. So without taking any time, requesting Mr. Sudipta Bhattacharya to start his presentation.
Thank you, sir. Is my slide visible?
Yeah, visible, boss. You can put it on that PPT mode.
Yeah. Right. So I think without further ado, I'll start with when inspection, search, and seizure can be initiated. That is the given topic. I also wanted to talk about imprisonment and preventive detention, but I think Shivam has covered it at length. So I'll stick to inspection, search, and seizure. Let's understand the source of the law. We have section 67 of the CGST Act, which provides for these, read with rules 139 to 141. 6710 also says that provisions of Code of Criminal Procedures, CRPC, relating to search and seizure shall so far as may be apply to search and seizure under this section. Mind you, only search and seizure, not inspection. So this is the third sort of overarching source of law. Now this so far as may be is of a great importance. It's of great interest also, because you have to understand that CRPC, being Criminal Procedure Code, provides a set of guidelines, protective measures, due processes, etc. for search, seizure, and even arrest. And it has been a constant tussle as to what extent the benefits of the fair processes under CRPC will be applicable even under the financial laws, fiscal laws. It's not a new debate under GST. It has arisen under income tax, customs, etc. What 6710 also says is that whatever applies to a magistrate under CRPC in a comparable context, it would basically be the commissioner. And one of the very important guidelines or protections that we have borrowed from CRPC in the context of search and seizure is the concept of Panchnama. Basically, statement from two independent witnesses of the locality where a search or seizure action is being carried out. It Panchnama encapsulates or sort of describes how the search proceeded and becomes a very, very critical document in subsequent litigation and proceedings that happen. And often assessees rely on Panchnama or question the validity of Panchnama to squash or challenge a search and seizure operation. So that's a critical thing that emanates from Criminal Procedure Code. Now coming to inspection. Inspection, I mean, in the words of the government itself, it's a softer provision than search. What it enables is, it allows officers to access any place of business of a taxable person or someone who is engaged in transport of goods or someone who is owning or operating a warehouse or go down, access, visually see and gather data, not go deep into finding things, not rip apart sofas, those kind of aggressive things that happen in search. None of that. This is a gentler, softer provision of visually inspecting, and that too restricted to a place of business, as opposed to if you see search and seizure powers are for in any place. This is restricted to place of business, but we should bear in mind that place of business is defined to include a place where a taxable person maintains his books of accounts. So if a senior executive's house is a place where books of accounts are maintained, then of course place of business will also include that. But otherwise, typically inspection does not envisage going into someone's residence. Search, of course, we understand what search means, all of us. It's an action of the government machinery to go look through carefully for a person, place, area, object, whatever. It's a very wide sort of ambit. The crux is that we have to look for something secreted in any place, secreted, kept in secret, concealed in any place. What is the interpretation of secreted? We'll come to in the next slide. Needless to say, inspection, search, seizure, especially search and seizure, they affect fundamental rights. They cause a massive disruption in our life or in our business. And to that extent, it has to be very strictly protected and strictly controlled, and which is why we have the trigger for this has to emanate from an authorization from the proper officer, not below the rank of Joint Commissioner, having reasons to believe. Reasons to believe, I'll come to later. Shivam has also covered it at length. Proper officer is another concept that needs to be talked about. I mean, we all are aware of the concept of, we are the judgment of Canon from the recent Supreme Court decision, where they deliberated in the context of customs and DRI on about what is a proper officer. Suffice to say, the point that proper officer is someone whose jurisdiction, territorial jurisdiction, or who is the original assessing authority, that strain of thought would apply to GST as well. And to that extent, if we believe that authorization has not come from the proper officer, not the jurisdictional Joint Commissioner, from someone else, of some belonging to some other territorial jurisdiction, that can be a ground of challenge by itself against a search and seizure. We'll come to a live example of that in a bit. Now let's talk about the triggers for a search, seizure, and inspection. For inspection, it has to be a taxable person has suppressed supply transaction or about stock of goods, or claimed ITC by contravening any provision or rule to evade tax under the Act. That is critical. There has to be an intent to evade. That has to be proved for inspection. Or it can be against any person who is engaged in transport or storage of goods and who is keeping goods which have escaped punishment of tax, or kept his accounts of goods in a manner that is likely to cause evasion of tax. So evasion of tax is the key trigger. Search and seizure have the similar triggers. Both are covered under 67(2) of CGST Act, which is pari materia with section 105 of Customs Act. And to that extent, the jurisprudence under customs can definitely be borrowed. What are the triggers? Any goods liable to confiscation, or any documents or books or things liable to confiscation. I see am I audible?
Yeah, audible. So they are audible. Audible.
Okay. Thanks. So the first one is goods liable to confiscation, or any documents or books or things. Now, liable to confiscation is not defined, but we find the echo of that in section 130. So obviously the question that arises is, does it mean we have to borrow the intent to evade requirement from section 30 when we are interpreting this particular subclause of section 67(2)? If we do, the next question would be, then after seizure of goods or documents, does one need to follow the procedure under section 130 of appealing and applying for clearance of the goods, etc.? So that's one unanswered aspect. Second, it says documents, books, or things. You can interpret documents or books and maybe try and argue that I am not, or the thing that has been captured or seized is not documents or books. But things is wide in ambit. So it will cover IT assets too. It will cover your laptop, the data in your laptop. It will cover mobile phone. It will cover the data in your mobile phone. And this brings us to an interesting question. Can SSEs resist providing their passwords? आप बोल सकते हो कि password नहीं देंगे हम आपको. The basis for such a claim arises from in the Indian Constitution, we have a right against self-incrimination. Basically, no one can be forced to be a witness against himself. That law typically applies in the criminal law context, but even if we apply it in this context, in the context of search and seizure, or in the context of preventive arrests, etc., it will not stack up, because the argument of self-incrimination has held to be inapplicable in cases where SSEs, or where the accused have been asked to provide handwriting sample, DNA sample, blood sample, etc., etc. So things that are purely in the domain of personal knowledge of a particular person is only protected by this right of self-incrimination. Password, unfortunately, is not something that is protected. So if there is a raid in your office or your client's office and a laptop or a mobile is seized, officer can definitely ask for the password to be provided and made available to him. It is in the same nature as a handwriting sample, or keys to some place, or some comparable comparable things. So unfortunately, the right of self-incrimination defense would not be available. There has recently been a Karnataka High Court decision also, I think about 6 months back, which sort of buttresses this point. So this is one aspect that one needs to be very careful about, that the ambit of things is very wide, and hence in a search and seizure operation, wide variety of documents, things, and books and assets can be confiscated, can be seized, not confiscated, seized. Second part of the trigger is which in the proper officer's opinion shall be useful for or relevant to any proceedings under this act. Look at the width of the ambit. Useful for or relevant to any proceedings. Contrast this with the provisions for summons. I'm sure someone would be covering summons also in today's conference. If you see the provision of summons, it says, uses the words in any inquiry. So someone can be summoned for an inquiry that has already started. Contrast this with search, where it can be for any proceedings. So summons cannot be starting point of an inquiry or an investigation, but search and seizure can. So that is another important takeaway from the definition, from the reading of section 67. And last but not the least, are secreted in any place. So goods liable to confiscation or documents, books, or things which in the proper officer's opinion shall be useful for or relevant to any proceedings under this act, and which are secreted in any place. Lawyers like me, obviously, in the decades gone by, had tried to argue that secreted has to be interpreted very strictly, and if documents are not hidden, if documents are available or goods are available, normally it cannot be used to say to be secreted, and hence challenging the legality of a search. Unfortunately, Supreme Court has overruled such attempts long back. In the case of Gyanchand in 1961, they took a fairly broad view of secreted, or a diluted view, I would say. They say documents which are not kept in their usual place, documents or things which a person is likely to keep out of the way or put in a place where the officer cannot find it. So not a very strict interpretation was given to secreted, something that you move from one place to another in a manner that may not be easily accessible or traceable by a particular officer. That would qualify the threshold of secreted. So these are the triggers for inspection, search, and seizure. Moving on. The next step, of course, is authorization from the proper officer, not below the rank of Joint Commissioner, having reasons to believe. Reason to believe, Shivam has already dealt with. Effectively, it has to be something more than reason to suspect. It has to be, the materials have to be relevant. Someone, a prudent man applying his mind judicially, should reach that conclusion or reach the belief that yes, there is a reason to believe that the triggers that we discussed about for inspection, search, or seizure does exist in the present facts. Important to note that under GST law, it is not mandatory to record the basis of such belief, unlike in CRPC or Income Tax Act, and also pari materia provision under Customs Act. In Customs Act, however, in the context of Customs Act, the Kerala High Court had held that the proper officer should record such reason, even though the law does not mandate it to, should record such reason, so that courts may examine the validity or sufficiency of reason to believe at a later date. So even though the law does not mandate it, there are High Court decisions which suggest that. Unfortunately, I have not come across a Supreme Court decision which emphasizes on this. However, in a litigation, in an effort to contest a search and seizure, one can definitely rely on this. Also, the authority must have sufficient material to form reasonable belief. And the corollary to this is there cannot be a roving inquiry. There cannot be fishing for finding some incriminating material. So ऐसा नहीं हो सकता कि हम रेड करने चलते हैं, कुछ तो मिल ही जाएगा. That can't be the approach. That can't be the concept. That courts have been unanimous that roving inquiry is not possible. One must know, or at least have a basic idea of what we are looking for. What the officers must know what they are looking for, reasonably know where they have to look for what they are looking for. So it cannot be a general, let's see what we can find kind of a search. So that's a very important protection that is available to SSEs. Judicial review of reasons to believe is possible. When court cannot sit in appeal, it will not go, deep diving into what is the nature of the, the information, etc. But it can definitely see, is there a reasonable nexus between the material on record and the formation of belief that yes, the conditions, that the triggers that we saw have indeed been satisfied. And one of the last points I want to highlight, and this is a very critical one. In India, I mean, since we are talking about challenging search or seizure, illegal search, illegal seizure, challenging illegal seizure, I mean, the impact is tangible. We can get goods that have been seized, unseized, released. What is the impact of challenging a search operation, illegal search? Because in India, we don't accept the doctrine of fruit of the poisonous tree. What does fruit of the poisonous tree mean? That evidence that you have collected in an illegal search is also poisoned, is also defective, is also illegal, and hence cannot be relied upon by court. That is what the doctrine suggests. That's a doctrine that has been accepted very strongly in US under US constitutional law. Unfortunately, specifically rejected in India as early as 1974 in the context of income tax. This was the case of Puranmal versus Director of Inspection, where they specifically said, refused to accept this doctrine from US. But we must realize that Puranmal was on the basis of the premise that there is no right to privacy under the Indian Constitution. In 1974, Indian Constitution or Indian Supreme Court did not recognize a right of privacy. That is not the case anymore. We all know in 2017, in the case of Puttaswamy, a 9-judge bench of Supreme Court has unanimously held the right to privacy is a fundamental right, which brings us to a very interesting sort of argument. Is it now time to reconsider Puranmal? Does it give us a right to challenge the rejection by Indian courts of the fruit of the poisonous tree doctrine? Can we say now that if the search is illegal, any evidence collected in that search should not be admissible against me when the prosecution, if and when the prosecution or the adjudication begins? I think these are areas which will get explored extensively in the coming days. These are areas where lawyers will try and pry open opening for their clients. And once we start challenging or trying to get a backdoor entry for the fruit of the poisonous tree doctrine, one question will also come: can we now ask for compensation for illegal searches? I think that question will not be far behind either, because right to privacy has been elevated to be a very strong fundamental right as a part of right to life itself. So if someone has violated that by doing an illegal search of my premises, compensation for illegal search cannot be ruled out either. And in American constitutional law, this is a very well recognized concept. So I think clearly we will see some of these things being tried in the coming days. One recent Delhi High Court judgment, as recent as day before yesterday, 20th July, this judgment came in the case of RJ Trading versus Commissioner of CGST. The SSC is a cigarette trader. GST registered in Delhi, has been filing regular returns. On 13th February, which was a Saturday, DGGI Ahmedabad officers, along with some DGGI Delhi officers, including an inspector, CGST South Commissioner, they visited his premises. It was found locked. They sealed it. Then another visit happened on 14th August and search conducted. On 5th March, officers of Noida Commissionerate paid a visit along with Additional Commissioner, CGST Delhi North Commissionerate. This, mind you, is located in Delhi, registered in Delhi as a part of the North Commissionerate. A Panchnama was drawn up, order of seizure of documents done, order of prohibition made. There were 90 cartons of cigarette which was held to be, which was kept there in the shop. They were not seized, but there was an order of prohibition that was placed on them that you cannot move them, you cannot sell them, etc., etc. In both the seizure and prohibition orders, they had very nicely copy-pasted section 67(2)'s language, saying that I have reason to believe that so-and-so has happened. So what was happening is this was part of a larger investigation across Gujarat, Uttar Pradesh, etc. So the Joint Commissioner in Noida wanted the additional commissioner in Delhi to find out for another party's investigation, does this RJ Trading exist as a company? Does it really exist? That was the extent of the communication. On that basis, the additional commissioner issued an authorization for the search and seizure. Mind you, the AC issued the authorization, not the joint commissioner, right? So when High Court was approached, High Court noted the fact that reason to believe is a jurisdictional point. If you don't have reason to believe, or if you don't have sufficient reason to believe, then it goes to the root of the ability to initiate the search. High Court also noted that the Delhi North Commissionerate was not doing any investigation against RJT. The whole authorization was based on a request or a communication from the Joint Commissioner Noida that can you find out if this is real? Can you find out if this is genuine? That is all. The court said that cannot be a basis to form reason to believe. Reason to believe has to be independently formed based on certain information. Where is the decision-making process? Where is your analysis? Noida Commissionerate has not even asked you. The court said the Noida Commissionerate has not even asked you that yes, there is a problem. Yes, this person might be, fraudulently evading, tax or taking credit or whatever. They just said that you find out if this is genuine or not. On that basis, a reason to believe cannot be formed, and the search and seizure were held to be unlawful. This is as recent as 3 days back. So clearly, the set of guidelines that have been laid down in the statute, read with the Criminal Procedure Code, needs to be very strongly adhered to. And at any stage where it fails, it has to be, the SSEs can challenge, and we have the live example in front of us where it has been successfully challenged by this cigarette trader by the name of RJ Trading. Now, important to remember for all of us, there are a set of guidelines under issued by the CBIC itself vis-a-vis search and seizures. One is the CBIC circular dated 1st February of this year, where important safeguards have been provided. Second, one can also look at the Haryana circular of last year, 13 February 2020, where they have given a detailed description of how reason to believe is to be formed, how a proper officer may obtain information sufficient to create a credible reason to believe. I think both these documents will be very useful source materials in any litigation to challenge illegal search, seizure, inspection, etc. Moving on imprisonment, given that it has already been touched upon, I'll be very brief about it. So these are the 4 categories. I think Shivam also touched upon these, basis which preventive detention or preventive arrest under Section 69 can trigger. Things like supply of goods or services without invoice with intent to evade tax, issuance of invoice without any supply, leading to wrongful availment, utilization of ITC, fraudulent availment of ITC, or collecting tax but not depositing it the same. If the amount at stake is more than 5 crores, it can lead to a 5 crore imprisonment under Section 132, and then under 69 it becomes cognizable and non-bailable. What that means is, if this provision has been invoked, then you have to go to court to seek a bail. Otherwise, for the same offenses, if the amount involved is less than 5 crore but upwards of 2.5, you can still get a default bail from the DC or AC of the jurisdictional commissionerate itself, because the DC or AC will have the same power as the officer in charge of a police station, and they can release an SSE on bail or on a bond. So this is the very basic premise. I don't want to spend too much time on this because I think Shivam has already touched upon. What I want to highlight is the fact that because of the way this is worded, these may seem like a very strong threshold or sort of really heinous crimes, so to say. Supply of goods or services without invoice with intent to evade tax. This may seem like a clear case of fraud, but look at the scenarios where these are being invoked. There, I have seen a query where they have said that you are doing a branch transfer, provision of support service from a branch to HO, and we believe that there is the branch is incapable, it does not have the sufficient human resources, etc., to provide that support service to the head office. Hence, you are providing, you are raising an invoice without actually doing any supply, and hence we will invoke the second category and do a preventive arrest. So that is the extent to which people are going, the officers are going, and I guess that's what Vimalji was touching upon in the previous session, that there is no problem if the real culprits are being arrested. But look at the misuse, because of the sheer power that has been given without sufficient checks and balances, the amount of misuse that is happening is also, it's scary. Then I have dealt with cases. So even a 2A 3B mismatch case can lead to a reason to believe, because 2A 3B mismatch has been used under Rule 86A for blockage of credit, and that also uses the word fraudulent availment of credit, right? So if that qualifies as reason to believe under 86A, what is stopping someone from using a 2A 3B mismatch to argue fraudulent availment of credit and thus seek preventive arrest under Section 69? Those kind of, and I'm not exaggerating this fear. As I speak today, 2 of my clients are being threatened on this basis. I have dealt with recently two, I'll take 2 case studies in brief. One is that of an e-commerce player, a very large e-commerce player, who has to hire a huge amount of manpower on a contract basis. So he appoints multiple manpower service providers. And Vimalji, this is the example of L3 or L4 level person. So that person is getting manpower services, getting a legitimate invoice, paying GST on that, taking credit of that. The manpower in question, all those people are turning up in my office. I have Aadhaar card authentication. I have biometric proof. I have video recording of them coming in. Despite that, because there is an ongoing investigation somewhere else against one of these manpower service providers, I am being harassed. My senior officers are being harassed, saying that it's an elaborate scheme by you to evade GST, to fraudulently take GST credit, and we would arrest you unless you deposit 20 crores. Because you must, since we can't find those other guys, you must pay those 20 crores immediately, else we will arrest. So and we had to fight tooth and nail to get them interim relief from Patiala House Court, the Sessions Court in Delhi. Similarly, in the case of a scrap dealer, a large size scrap dealer in Delhi, he has all the proof that the goods have come, the trucks were weighed, all those documents exist. The e-way, there is video footage, the sample analysis, all of those documents are in place. Yet, because the GST authorities are finding it difficult to track and trace the original suppliers or people down the chain, they're trying to catch the scrap dealer. They're trying to threaten him into paying up and saying, and they're trying to invoke this fraudulent availment of GST ITC system allegation here. So that is the level at which this is getting misused. I don't deny for a second that there are genuine cases of fraud, but there has to be a line drawn somewhere. In the case of Make My Trip, Delhi High Court as well as Supreme Court laid down a few guidelines that without doing the assessment, arrest can be done, but it should be on a rarest of rare case. So if an SSC has a good track record of depositing GST, has been in business for a while, is generally known to be a reputed company, has had a good past history, then one should not invoke the arrest provisions. And there has to be a clear guideline from the department to that effect. Because otherwise, there are so many contrary high court judgments when, and this is, I speak from personal experience, when we fight these battles at a criminal court, at a sessions court, you should see how strong the department's allegations are. They keep shouting, "Janab, ye chor hai," and I'm not making this up. This happened. They say that all these are big frauds, and we will expose them. That's the kind of language that is used. So the reputational risk also one needs to take into account for some of these cases. So I think the point that I want to make is the provisions, the 4 sort of scenarios in which preventive arrest can be triggered, is well laid out. But the potential for misuse is high, and which is why for us as SSEs or advisors to SSEs, it is critical to check at every step, has reason to believe, the threshold for reason to believe been met? Is there a reason for arrest? Is there a threat perception that the SSE will free? Is there a threat perception that the SSE will distort evidence? Is there a requirement for custodial investigation of this SSE? If I have gone for 4 summons, I have given you all the documents and answered all your queries, can I still be arrested? Because what remains? What is the need for custodial interrogation? That has to be established, and that is the ground on which we have to fight some of these battles. Like in search and seizure, we have a bunch of guidelines from the government itself. We have the flyer, from 1st Jan 2018, CBIC's FAQ on GST of 2018. The chapter 18 is important. Circular of 2019, which lays down standard authorization formats for search, summons, etc., to be used from January of 2020. And very important to remember the landmark judgment of Supreme Court in the case of DK Basu for arrests. These are the Supreme Court laid down multiple protective measures for arrests. I have only quoted 4 here, but this has been referred in the FAQ, departmental FAQ also. And that is also another thing that we can look at when we are contesting someone's arrest or an illegal arrest. So personnel carrying out the arrest has to have clear identification. They have to prepare a memo of arrest at the time of arrest. There has to be witness for that arrest. Family has to be informed in time. The person who is being arrested should be checked for injuries, etc., should be permitted to meet his lawyer from time to time during interrogation. So all of these protections have been laid down already by the Supreme Court. It is upon us as advisors to SSEs, as professionals, to ensure that the department follows these to the T. The department also accepts the validity of this because it forms part of the CBIC flyer. So as I said, it is upon us to ensure, it is upon us to keep them honest. I think with that, I thank you for a patient listening.
Thank you, Mr. Sudipta, for wonderful presentation. Very good, excellent, with a lot of content insight. So next to invite Mr. Dhanendra Kumar from Nitya Tax Associate for his presentation. And today we are not, reading out the profile of each of the speaker, but everyone is known in their field. So Mr. Dhanendra Kumar, are you there?
I'm there, very much there, sir. Thank you so much. Thank you, Vimalji.
Yeah.
So I hope my screen is visible.
Yeah, visible. Yes, correct.
All right. Thank you, sir. So I will touch upon a very important topic, and the context was set by Vimalji in the morning itself in his theme presentation. And this relates to Section 6, which relates to the administration and authorization of officers. Now, as we all know, the taxable event under GST is supply. And we know that the transactions could be interstate, which may attract integrated tax, or it could be intra-state and attracting central and state tax. And we also know that all the assessees, all the taxpayers have been assigned. They could be administered by a central authority or a state tax authority. We also know, just to give an example, supposing if you are registered in Delhi and you are procuring goods or services from pan-India, from different states outside the state. Likewise, you could be supplying goods or services across India, pan-India. So there can be multiple states that you might be dealing with while you might be registered only in Delhi. In such situations, these administration and these all these, who is the authority who will investigate, who will do what action, all these become very assumed significant, they become very relevant. Also, the cross empowerment and concurrent or parallel jurisdiction, which Bimalji touched upon in the morning in his theme presentation, these also play big role, important role, because as we saw the consequences, whether it is search seizure operations, whether it is arrest, whether it is other investigation, summons, etc., they all play important role. And for a taxpayer who is liable to pay tax and be compliant under the GST law. So as we have seen that, we have already completed 4 years of journey under the GST, and even till this day, there have been multiple disputes on the jurisdiction aspect itself. So Section 6 is the relevant provision for this. And what Section 6 provides is, first clause is relating to the enabling or empowering provision, and which says that, and I'm referring only to the central GST provisions, and they will likely apply to state GST, but they are all perimeteria. So I'm not referring to state GST provisions separately. So Section 6.1 talks about that the state tax officers are also authorized as proper officers for the purpose of CGST Act, subject to certain conditions that may be imposed by the government on the recommendation of the GST Council. So that is the first provision. There is an empowerment that has been done, authorization given to cross empowerment to central state tax officers under CGST Act. Then we have Section 6.2. There is Clause A and Clause B. Clause A deals with that whenever any officer is passing an order under CGST, he will also pass an order, corresponding order under SGST and UTGST. Because as we said, if it is an intra-state supply, it will attract both C and S, both center and state tax, and therefore he has to pass order under both the taxes. Then Clause B of Section 6.2 deals with a negative covenant, which restricts the purpose is to avoid any chaos or any kind of conflict. And it says that if any proceeding on a subject matter is initiated by SGST authority, then no parallel proceeding should be initiated by central tax authority. Likewise, the provision exists under state tax, where they say that if central tax authority has initiated a proceeding on a subject matter, then the state authority will not initiate any further proceeding in that. As we heard from different panelists since afternoon, we have seen that there are parallel proceedings that are carried out. Even Sudipto touched upon that point, that parallel proceedings being carried out. Then Section 6.3 talks about, this is more of a remedial measure, which says that if a particular order has been passed by a particular authority, then the appellate remedies or all other remedies will lie before that very appellate authorities of that very commissionerate or that very jurisdiction, administration. So if a CGST authority passes an order, then appeal, rectification, revision, etc. will lie before central tax appellate authorities and not before state tax authorities. So we'll quickly cover these aspects. And first one that we saw is the cross empowerment provision. And I'll just touch upon some of the basic judgments here without going very much deep, because I think we have already crossed some time, reached some timelines. So this provision, Section 6.1, was challenged before Rajasthan High Court about the constitutionality. Rajasthan High Court upheld the constitutionality, saying that it is not ultra vires, and they drew power from, they took help of Section 9, subsection 2 of the Central Sales Tax Act. They drew comparison saying that, under Central Sales Tax also, the state VAT officer had the authority to collect and assess taxes under Central Sales Tax Act. Likewise, under CST, under GST also, the state authority is given power to collect central tax, and likewise central tax authority is given power to collect tax under state tax. So the section is completely constitutional. Then we come another couple of judgments on this aspect, which are that if a state tax authority is behaving or is acting like a central tax authority, then in that situation, they must follow the provisions of central tax or IGST. They cannot continue to follow state laws or state VAT laws or those provisions. So these two cases, what had happened, there was, interstate movement of goods. And during interstate movement of goods, these authorities, the state tax authorities, intercepted the goods, and they detained the goods on the ground that the requisite documents were not available. And what were those documents? Those documents were prescribed under the respective state tax laws. Whether it was in one case, it was state VAT law, like the Allahabad case, UP VAT law, at transit declaration form was prescribed. So these documents were not prescribed under the CGST law or under IGST law, and therefore what the courts held in both the cases, that when the state tax authority is acting as central tax officer, they have to follow the CGST provisions. They cannot then stick to SGST provisions. And in such on such analysis, the detention was quashed in both these cases. So next we come to the rule 6.1, this section 6.1, because it only talks about that if a CGST authority is passing an order, that order will apply equally. He should also pass order for SGST. So we are not discussing much about it because this is relatively simple. There is no dispute on this aspect. But the most critical out of these is the parallel proceedings or concurrent proceedings by multiple authorities, which is rule section 6.2b, the clause B of section 6, subsection 2, which prohibits, it is a restrictive provision, that in any proceeding on a subject matter initiated by SGST authority, state tax authority, no parallel proceeding to be initiated by central tax authority. So now here there are two important points. One is what qualifies as subject matter. Second is what does a proceeding mean, because these are the two critical points, and then we will see how the courts have interpreted them to see what needs to be, how this provision needs to be applied. So in this context, subject matter has been defined under Black's law as things in dispute. There is an Allahabad High Court judgment in the case of GK Trading, where they have held subject matter to be the cause of action. They have said that if same cause of action for the same dispute is involved in a proceeding before proper officer, then we will say that the subject matter is same. So as we saw that the objective behind this provision is that there should be no overlapping jurisdiction, because multiplicity of proceedings or multiplicity of litigation is not warranted. Therefore, this is a provision which safeguards this multiplicity. So on this point, there are a couple of rulings. And when we see there is a Delhi High Court judgment, Watermelon Management. In this case, what had happened is that there were parallel proceedings initiated by DGGI and CGST. Now, it is not center or state, but rather two departments of center. One is DGGI investigation wing, the other is the Central Tax Commissionerate. When the taxpayer approached the High Court, the Central Tax Commissionerate authorities agreed that they will hand over their investigation to DGGI, and this matter got resolved. But in the case of Kushal Kumar, which is a Punjab Haryana High Court judgment, there were multiple proceedings by DGGI Ludhiana, DGGI Bhopal, and CGST authorities Kanpur. Now, what the court held is that the subject matter of all the three proceedings is different, and therefore section 6.2b is not applicable. And the reason why they said subject matter is different, because the suppliers were different. Now, this was a case where fraudulent ITC, it involved the case, the facts were that fraudulent ITC was involved, and from different suppliers, invoices were procured without goods. And based on that, the ITC was availed. Because the language used, adopted in section 6.2b is subject matter. It is not saying different suppliers or transactions. So we will not look at the transaction wise or supplier wise. If the authority, if one authority is dealing with the subject matter of fraudulent ITC, then that authority alone can look into it. Therefore, there are three different authorities parallelly conducting proceedings should not have been allowed. And in our view, this Punjab Haryana High Court judgment did not delve into that aspect correctly. Again, in the case of GK Trading, as I just, sorry, before that, we have the Anurag Suri case of Orissa High Court. In this case, what had happened was that DGGI investigation was on, and during that investigation, the state authorities issued show cause notice. And some period in the show cause notice was overlapping with the investigation DGGI was undertaking. What Orissa High Court did, it rightly quashed the show cause notice and directed state authorities not to take any coercive action during pendency of proceedings by DGGI. So this is a correct judgment. You cannot have multiple proceedings on the same subject matter. Again, we just discussed GK trading initially. So here is the case where summons were issued both by state tax authorities as well as central tax authorities. Now, when the petitioner approached the High Court said that proceedings what summons contemplate is an inquiry, and inquiry under summons do not constitute proceedings. Proceedings are only in the nature of assessment, audit, demand, and recovery. And because the subject matter is not same, therefore, there is no restriction and both authorities can simultaneously issue summons. In our view, this is not a correct judgment for the very simple reason that the law does not define what is a proceeding. Even otherwise, summons are held to be judicial proceedings. Throughout the law itself, GST law itself recognizes that summons, the statement recorded under summons, these are judicial proceedings. The Allahabad High Court has not considered any of these submissions. Secondly, nowhere the law has defined that proceedings can only mean assessment, audit, and demand recovery. Even investigation proceedings are very much proceedings, and therefore going by wrongly applying the language of or interpreting proceedings that inquiry and proceedings are not synonymous is absolutely incorrect. These are very much proceedings, and therefore Allahabad High Court, this judgment is incorrect in our view. Next, we have a case of Siddhi Vinayak again by Allahabad High Court. Here is a case where CGST authorities issued summons, and already there was a show cause notice pending issued by the state authorities. Now, state authorities show cause notice was under section 74 for ascertainment of tax liability. This was for determining the tax liability, which is for fraud or suppression, etc. So this is absolutely no problem. This was already existing. Whereas the summons issued by central authority were for the reason that this particular taxpayer interfered in some official work during investigation stage. And for that, they were investigating. Now, this subject matter is altogether different. This had nothing to do, this summons investigation had nothing to do with the ascertainment of tax liability. So the High Court held that these are independent proceedings, while they agreed that these are proceedings, but these are independent proceedings. They are not same subject matter. And therefore, they said that correctly held that there is no bar under section 6.2 for continuing these proceedings. Next, we have, which Vimalji also pointed out, Raj Metal's Calcutta High Court. Though this is an interim stay order only, but very correctly, Calcutta High Court in this case stayed the proceedings or the summons issued by the state authorities during pendency of proceedings before CGST, Central Tax Authorities. And the logic which High Court said that parallel proceedings are not permitted. You cannot 6.2b clearly bars such proceedings, and therefore Calcutta High Court rightly stayed these summons by the state authorities. Then we have Kerala High Court. I mean, there are multiple High Courts, and what we have noticed is, after this, I will conclude on this point after Suresh Kumar. This is a Kerala High Court where there was an audit being conducted under section 65, and parallelly there was investigation under section 67. And Kerala High Court said that these are independent, separate cause of action, separate subject matter, and therefore to that extent, section 6.2b does not bar such independent proceedings. So prima facie, the Kerala High Court appears to be correct. But what needs to be examined, because this judgment did not give that much detail, that what was the subject matter in the investigation? Was it covered by the audit? Was it related to the documents that were being scrutinized in the audit? then there can be overlapping proceedings. If not, then this judgment could be correct. Also, some period could be overlapping. So unless those facts are available, it is difficult to comment at this point in time. But prima facie, this judgment appears to be correct. So what we see from these multiple high court judgments is that there have been within 4 years. So and there are several other judgments we have not we have only picked up a certain select few. So multiple proceedings and departments are because there is a limited pie, and whenever there is a taxpayer who is under investigation, it is seen that multiple departments try and reach out to that and try and investigate that taxpayer and try and collect their revenue. Question that remains is that this has resulted in a complete administrative chaos, because a person, as I gave an example, that if you are registered in Delhi and if you are, because you are procuring from multiple states or you are supplying in multiple states, and if such investigation will start by all the authorities pan India, then it is impossible for the taxpayer to address that issue or to appear or participate in all the investigation. We have seen such situations are live cases, client cases, where the head office is separately searched, bank accounts are attached by DGGI in one state, and then the warehouse or some other depot is searched by another authority, and another, then ITC is blocked in some other state. And all these proceedings, parallel proceedings, are going on from different authorities. And when you, what is seen also important is that when you approach the courts, there is no uniformity in the interpreting these terms, proceedings and subject matter. Particularly, subject matter is not being interpreted correctly. Even proceedings, there is an issue, but subject matter in particular, the way courts are interpreting, as if it is not subject matter that is the language adopted under section 6, rather it is the transaction or the supplier. So even if the supplier is different, they say that they are free to, the authorities are free to conduct proceedings. So that is not the intent behind this provision, and the language of the provisions section 6(2)(b) is very clear. There is no scope for any ambiguity, and the courts, wherever they have interpreted in such narrow sense by using different supplier or different transaction, that is not a correct interpretation. Next we come to 6(3), which is the provision which is the remedial provision, that any remedy against order passed by CGST authority shall lie before central tax appellate authorities only, and not before state tax or UT tax authorities. So here also there have been a couple of cases, and these are appellate authority cases. In the case of there is MetaCube Business Center Commissioner Appeal, and both are from Rajasthan. And in both these cases, what had happened is that the order was passed by state tax authority, but the taxpayers filed appeals before central tax appellate authorities. And in that situation, the appellate commissioner, they dismissed the both the appeals by saying that we do not have jurisdiction to entertain these appeals. And while the finding as regards not having jurisdiction is absolutely correct, what they did not look into is that they could have transferred the files to state tax appellate authorities, or at least this matter has not even traveled to the any high court at this point in time, because there is always a plea of wrong forum available in such cases. So I think that we with this we cover these section 6 complete. So this administration of by tax authorities, how they will administer, and what kind of cross empowerment and or concurrent jurisdiction is given. While there are enabling provisions, they are resulting more into chaos because of the manner or the way the tax authorities are implementing it, or the parallel proceedings that are going on. And this is pan India, it is happening. So it is high time that some clarification or some kind of clarity is brought by the GST Council or through CBIC, so that these issues get resolved. So with this, I end my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Arvind Kumarji, for excellent presentation. Thank you very much. Now you can stop your share screen.
Is it still visible? I think
It is going on.
Okay, let me just, I'll just stop it.
Yeah. So, yeah. Now we got 3 learned speakers today. They have given their insight. Now I will request all the attendees and participants. So at the end, we should sum up where we have reached. See, Mr. Rohan Saab was supposed to come today, but because of certain occupancy, he's not available today. But I will use this 20-25 minutes for the conclusion of today's webinar, and this I want from all of you, all attendees. You can use the chat box and give me the answer. All 3 speakers are also available, and we want attendees must give their insight, their input. The first point which I would like to draw, and I want from each one of you, please, there's reason to believe. This word is being used in section 67 for inspection, search and seizure. This term is used under section 69 for arrest provision. To my mind, reason to believe should not be on apprehension. That is what the conclusion coming out. Just because tax officer is apprehending, that should not be the reason to believe. Even though there is no provision of reason to be believed to be written in an order, but still there must be substantial background material in the hands of tax officer. Then only they should initiate. What is your view in a chat box? And you can say yes and no. My conclusion is reason to believe should not be left open-ended. It should not be dependent on apprehension. Just the apprehension in the mind of tax officer. It should be supported by concrete background material which should be substantiating a position either for going for inspection, search and seizure, and arrest. Do you all agree with me? Tell me yes or no in a chat box. I want each one of you must participate now. Tell me yes or no. This much only I'm looking for. We should not create confusion that reason to believe is open for the department to start investigation. First point, if you have agreed for that, second point coming out. We were discussing about arrest provision, right? Reason to believe. Preventive detention. Now, preventive detention to gather the information. And clear-cut distinction as far as I could understand whatever legal jurisprudence is developing as on date. It's in the name of preventive detention, you cannot detain a person like force summon is being issued. He has appeared before the authority. He has provided the information and he is not habitual offender. Can you detain him in the name of preventive detention? To my mind, these are excessive power in the hands of officer. And with the tagline reason to believe, he should not be detained. He should not be detained. If you want to detain someone, then he should be habitual offender. He is not cooperating, not providing the information, and you have a fear that he will destroy the evidence. So there has to be some demarcation, clear demarcation. It cannot be like that you can detain someone in the name of preventive detention who is supporting, coming as and when you want, appearing before authority as and when someone is being issued. So my submission, you tell me, whatever conclusion we are drawing. So I'm sure your chat box is saying yes, 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 yes. All right, coming to the third point, parallel proceedings. Mr. Dharnendra Kumar was presenting. Tell me, I'm a company. I got 29 registration in 29 different states. First of all, challenge for me, what is the same subject matter and what is the proceedings, same proceedings. Now just imagine a situation. First, SGST officials are coming in. Then from center, there may be anti-evasion department. There may be head office from the GST department. There may be DGGI department. And if this happened for all the respective registration in 29 states, my position as a taxpayer going for a toss will create a chaos for all of us together. It will not help us. Do you all agree? To my mind, what should be the position? Position should be, if some authority starting in this investigation, inquiry, he must complete whatever he want to check. He can check, cross-check everything and conclude the matter. Should not leave the option open for the another point of view, another subject matter, and then we have to go to different high court, and different high court then will say, no, there are two different subject matter. One has come for the fake invoicing, another one has come for fraudulent ITC. This is going to create big problem, and it will not give the simplicity for which we all are looking for GST. Do you all agree with me? Please tell me, do you all agree with me? And there has to be one. There has to be one. I'm requesting government to listen our voice. See, in the name of, both the officials are competent enough, they can initiate the proceedings, but it should not create a chaos for all the taxpayer. Do your part. That's what I'm looking for. Coming back to two different subject matter. And this two different subject matter which Mr. Rohan Shah was expected to deliberate today, but he is not available. I will take 10 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes maximum, and would like to deliberate on those 2 points. And these 2 points are very, very important. Recently, Honorable Supreme Court Justice, D.Y. Chandrachud. So I'm not saying from my side. It's not any statement which I'm giving. It is being stated in the open court by Honorable Justice D.Y. Chandrachud in the case of provisional attachment, and it was the case which came up before the Supreme Court in the case of Radha Krishnan Industries Limited. What Honorable Justice has said? He has said provisional attachment provision are draconian in nature. Draconian in nature. Why such statement are coming out? Please tell me. Who is creating such kind of provision? Why such law is not properly being implemented? And let me tell you what was the issue in the Supreme Court judgment where Honorable Justice has made this harsh comment. Issue was, initially, provisional attachment order was issued by local SGST, HP SGST department, Himachal Pradesh SGST department. Provisional attachment. And where provisional attachment is possible, whenever government commissioner, the wording of section 83H, commissioner is of the opinion. See, it is all commissioner opinion. Is of the opinion to protect the government revenue, he may pass an order for the provisional attachment against the property and bank account of taxable person. What Honorable Justice D.Y. Chandrachud has said, just because there was one provisional attachment order which got vacated sometime in 2019, again for same region, for the same cause, again you're going for provisional attachment. Is it possible? And with the provisional attachment, what is the example you're creating? Commissioner is having the opinion does not mean that he is open-ended. He has to pass speaking order for what region provisional attachment to be done. It should not be kept open-ended that they can attach my property or bank account. This was the conclusion in the Supreme Court judgment which I'm citing to you. Let me give you another Gujarat High Court judgment, and which was in the case of Vinod Kumar Murlidhar Chechani case. And even the Honorable Division Bench has said why such provisional attachment are being used as a mechanical method, as a normal method, whereas provisional attachment power must be used as an exception. You cannot disrupt the business. You cannot create the chaos with the business. If at all you want provisionally attached, you must create a guidelines that under such guidelines, you're going to provisionally attach. Fortunate enough, a circular number 359 dated 23rd of February 2021 got issued. And they have given 6 instances, 6 parameters. Under those parameters, provisional attachment can be done. Listen very carefully. What are those 6 parameters? The first parameter is supply of goods or services without invoice, which is called cash sale. Second, issuance of invoice without supply of goods or services, fake invoice. You are availing credit on such invoice or utilizing such wrongful availed credit. Third, GST collected but fails to pay beyond 3 months from the due date. Fifth, erroneous refund is being taken. And sixth, you are passing on credit to the recipient and commensurating tax is not being deposited with the government exchequer. 6 parameters. But what is important for us to know, this guideline which is issued by CBIC, by circular number 359, it is saying that the officer first to ensure due diligence, proper checking and verification, and this provisional attachment power should not be used as a mechanical method, ordinary method. If at all need to be attached, first attach the immovable property and then only movable property. But when you're attaching movable property, you should not attach finished goods, raw material, and should not disrupt the business. If business is being stopped and not being allowed to continue, then it is a halt. And that is not envisaged under the provision. So provisional attachment, and just to highlight one more point, with this circular coming out, we are finding every alternate day some of the judgment on provisional attachment. Section 67, search and seizure proceedings initiated. It is going on. You do not know whether there is tax evasion or not. Can you go and provisionally attach? I'm asking all of you, please tell me, search and seizure started. It is still going on. Nothing is being quantified. Can commissioner frame opinion that just because government revenue provisional attachment is possible? To my mind, no way. Please tell me. I want answer from each one of you. Is it possible? To my mind, no way. It is not possible at all. In one of the judgment which is coming from Punjab and Haryana High Court, I'm not citing those judgments. The judgments are there on public domain. Section 67, search and seizure proceedings are over. Once over, can you now provisionally attach? Unless there is any tax liability, how you can provisionally attach my property in my bank account? But these are the broader perspective. Now I'm asking a big question to all of you. Union Budget 2021, this Finance Bill 2021, by Section 115 of Finance Act 2021, I do not know how many of you are aware of with this provision. And be careful, it is most draconian provision and clause which is now being provided under provisional attachment. Provisional attachment of the property and bank account of taxable person. When government want to protect government revenue, this is the one side of the story. But I'm asking each one of you, whether government can provisionally attach property and bank account of any person? Please tell me in a chat box. Is it possible? Say yes and no. Whether they can attach property and bank account of any person? And whatever your answer would be, but let's wake up. Section 115 of Finance Act 2021 has made the provision. They have substituted Section 83 subsection 1, and which is yet to be notified. And what is the substituted provision, you know? Now, provisional attachment can be done against the property and bank account of taxable person and of any person under Section 122 subsection 1A of CGST Act. And what is there under Section 122 subsection 1A? A person who is causing to commit and retaining the benefit of 4 specified offenses. What are those 4 specified offenses? Supply of goods or services without invoice, issuance of invoice without supply of goods or services, ITC wrongly availed or utilized without actual receipt of goods or services, and ITC, ISD. So input tax credit on the basis of ISD, input service distributor, wrongly distributed. 4 offenses. So in 4 offenses, if any person is engaged and he's causing to commit and retaining the benefit, then provisional attachment can be done even against the property and bank account of such person engaged in those 4 specified offenses. Just look at the white power, and this provision, Section 83 subsection 1, going to be substituted. And just to give more alarm to you, more alarm. Earlier, Section 83 was applicable for specified section, Section 62, 63, 64, 67, 73, and 74. But now this Section 83 going to be applicable for whole chapter, chapter 12, chapter 14, and chapter 15. Even provisional assessment, even scrutiny of return can be a criteria for the provisional attachment. Such a wide power in the hands of officers, and that too when they are saying commissioner is of the opinion, I'm just drawing, there should be compensation for any illegal action, either search, seizure, or preventive detention or provisional attachment. If government is willing to protect government revenue by undertaking search, seizure, arrest, preventive detention, or provisional attachment, I want counter responsibility. You tell me, I'm asking all of you. I want counter responsibility. There should be compensation wherever there is illegal search, wherever there is illegal detention, wherever illegal provisional attachment. Is it not correct? Just because we leave it for the region to believe, just because we leave it is of the opinion, no way, no way, no way. There has to be counter accountability and responsibility. Yes, These provisions are meant to check tax evasion. But in the name of checking the tax evasion, it should not turn out to be harassment to the honest taxpayer. Do you all agree with me? That's what I'm saying. Tell me yes or no in a chat box. Do you all agree or not agree? To my mind, yes, there has to be. There has to be. Just because we are watching the provision, we are reading the provision, these provisions are meant only to see the tax evasion against the tax evader. It should not be used as a normal means to harass the honest taxpayer. Should not be a case. Coming to the last component, and then we can have question answers. We got all learned speakers sitting as of now. Last, recovery proceedings. Is it possible without issuance of so-called notice and without adjudication thereof? I will not take much time, but I will cite one section 78. Go back to section 78. You may check this provision of section 78, which say initiation of recovery proceedings is possible, no problem, possible only after 3 months from the date of service of the order. What is the meaning of this provision? There has to be so-called notice, there has to be order, and there has to be minimum 3 months time period given to the taxpayer for payment of liability. Only after 3 months there can be initiation of recovery proceedings. Recovery can be done. Even so-called notice has not been issued. Even adjudication is not being done. And during search and seizure, they are collecting the money. Is it tax amount? Is it advance tax? To my mind, they are not empowered to collect single penny. Why we should pay such liability? And why statements are being taken under duress and coercion? My only submission. And I said one Madras High Court judgment, any money collected during search and seizure, and when taxpayer is providing all the information to you, you as a department cannot collect that amount. And that Madras High Court judgment of Sri Nandi Dhal Mills Company Limited, it is being ordered whatever money they have collected must be refunded to the taxpayer. So I'm only saying as a submission part, recovery is not possible until so-called notice is being issued, until order is being passed, until 3 months elapsed. Provision of the act is saying so. I'm not saying out of the corner. So recovery just initiated can't be possible. Garnishing provision cannot be, I'm saying, is ultra vires if I look at the provision of the act. But nevertheless, this is what I'm citing all before you. We are just closing. I wanted to give 3-4 judgment for the recovery proceedings, but time is the pause. So I need to sum up my pointer on provisional attachment and recovery proceedings. So today we have tried with all my 3 learned speakers to give a flavor. What is this search, seizure, arrest, provisional attachment, parallel proceedings, bailable offenses and non-bailable offenses? Maybe now we can have some query. In case you're having some query, you can post your query and we can request the other speakers sitting online on dais, they can answer your query. Please tell me. So maybe the first one which I could see in chat box. Let me ask this question to Sudipta. Are you there? Mr. Dhanendra Kumar and Mr. Sibam, can you open your video so that, yeah. So maybe Mr. Sibam, are you there? No? Okay, Mr. Dhanendra Kumar, there is one question. Mayur is asking, accused has an indefeasible right to default bail under section 167 subsection 2 of the Code of Criminal Procedure. if the probe agency failed to complete the investigation on time. So default bail is there. Like if charge sheet is not being filed within 60 days, then you will get the default bail. Whether these kind of provision are applicable under GST law, that may be a query. Please tell me.
So definitely I can tell you from my experience under customs that this default bail provision of 60 days, which you just mentioned, was applicable if charge sheet is not filed, because even under customs, the commissioner has to give authorization for filing complaint, because these are non-cognizable offenses. And once the complaint is filed before magistrate within 60 days and magistrate takes cognizance, then only trial starts. So definitely in this case also, the provisions of CRPC, because the entire procedure for criminal prosecution, etc., is governed by CRPC, Code of Criminal Procedure. So these provisions will definitely apply. And if no criminal complaint is filed within 60 days, there will be default bail.
Okay, so I can't see Shivam is also online, but nevertheless, let me take second question, Mr. Dharnendra Kumar. Now this section 75 subsection 12, one explanation got inserted, and which talks about difference between GSTR 1 and 3B would be the self-assessment tax, and it can be recovered even without issuance of so-called notice. Is it possible? Explanation under section 75 subsection 12. To my mind, let me tell you, to my mind, this is too excessive power. There is a difference between GSTR 1 and 3B. Cannot be self-assessment tax. I should be given time, T plus 2 months, T plus 4 months, T plus 6 months. Then only you can say it is a self-assessment tax. And recovery without issuance of so-called notice. What is your take on this matter?
Absolutely agreed with you. See, there have been several judgments where tax was not in dispute, only interest was to be collected. Even in those cases, high courts held that a show cause notice has to be there to determine at least the quantification part. How do you quantify what computation you have done? What if the taxpayer has any explanation to offer? Unless you have given show cause notice and heard the taxpayer, you cannot simply collect directly. So recovery straight away is draconian. It is not permissible. Natural justice requires that you give an opportunity, you give a show cause notice, hear the taxpayer, thereafter you determine. And only the order of determination, then it can be recovered.
Okay, next question, which is posted by Manu Tayal. He is saying that GST department has recovered 97 lakh rupees from my client bank account. It is being recovered from the bank account, garnishing provision, without issue of so-called notice, on the basis of information received from another state, regarding fake ITC and block ITC under Rule 86A. Writ petition taking a lot of time. What to do in such cases? So he's asking some ready-made solution. Is it possible?
I mean, see, unlike GST department, who has the power of attaching or taking out money or recovery proceedings, etc., they can do. You as taxpayer do not have any such right except approaching the writ court. If writ court is not helping you, I mean, at the most, if you can file a representation, give all the basis that this amount is wrongly recovered from you, maybe if the authorities are satisfied, they may return, but otherwise very, very difficult. You have to press the writ court only or wait for the show cause notice to come. At least file a letter of protest that this you do not agree with the recovery, etc., and this is wrongly done. At least do that much.
Manu, answer to you from my side, and I will concur with Dharnendra Kumar ji, that something which is to be routed through writ option, department is not going to listen us. That's the reason they have recovered this amount, right? Now, having said that, I quoted section 78 just a while ago, which talks about that any initiation of recovery must start after 3 months from the date of service of the order. Having this provision, they are recovering this amount from my bank account. I do agree it may take some time, but that is most appropriate and advisable. And second, in case you feel like it is not possible, pay under protest. Keep your right and option open. So as and when they issue so-called notice and they appropriate this amount, you have a right to appeal. And once you have paid under protest, then your right to get refund will always be there when this is decided in your favor. That would be my answer, Manu, to you.
I'll have one more additional point, sir. They can file a letter to the authority saying that first, please provide the reason to believe why you have attached or you have collected this amount from my ECL. This is from the bank account, right? Not electronic
Bank account.
Okay. But still, they should ask under even section 83 requires reason to believe. They must ask for reason to believe. Then how can you? What basis you are doing it?
And that's what we are discussing when we started our webinar, and maybe ending up with a reason to believe. Mr. Sivam has joined. Mr. Sivam, little different question from one of the attendee. What is the difference between paper invoice and fake invoice? Sometimes department use word paper invoice, sometimes use fake invoice. Can an invoice be fake while all the particulars of suppliers are correct and digitally signed by the supplier?
I think in many of the judgment they use paper trading as a term, so it is interchangeably used. But what he's talking about only is the lack of particulars. That will not make it a fake invoice. Fake invoices, which is not, when they say fake invoice or paper transaction, means only the invoice without accompanying the goods or services. That's what they mean it. This certainly cannot come under the meaning of that section. So my answer is no, the invoice cannot be called to be fake if it is not just because it is not digitally signed. There can be issues on availment of credit. Because department may say because it's not a proper invoice, I will deny the credit, but all these are procedural, not grave, difficult, or this mistake you have done by not digitally signing it. You can't be covered under 132 or 69. That's what they are asking.
All right. Mr. Dharnend Kumar, whether practicing chartered accountant could represent the taxpayer who has received the summon from the GST authority. He's asking simple question, can I go on behalf of my client and represent?
So I can say that in majority of the cases, it all depends on the the investigating officer. In most cases, they decline to entertain any professional accompanying the the summoned person. You are made to sit outside. Professionals are made to sit outside. You can wait, but there is a Supreme Court judgment also. I think Puranpalli judgment is there, where the court held that these are investigating proceedings where if a professional interferes, then the very purpose of investigation frustrates, and therefore professionals should not be allowed. I mean, that was for lawyers. CAs and other professionals were held on the similar footing. Having said that, I have in personal experience seen that yes, DRI is more difficult, but DGGI and other investigating authorities generally allow, so long as you do not, as professional, you do not interfere in their question answer or whatever inquiry they are making. You can sit beside whatever is happening, these proceedings. It gives a comfort to the taxpayer. So it all depends. There's no clear-cut answer to this. These days, sometimes it is being allowed. In DK Basu also, and what Sudipto also said, that consultation is allowed. And that consultation is if you are sitting outside the room or nearby, then you can consult. So to that extent also it is allowed.
Okay. Maybe last question, Mr. Sivam, from you. There are cases where on pretext of summon, the enforcement authorities plant the plans to coercively arrest the taxpayer. So preventive detention, we talked a lot, preventive detention. Now they actually do the arrest. So he's apprehending in the name of summon, and they create all havoc and arrest the person. Is it not defeating the basic purpose and objective of summon provision where only inquiry is sought?
Definitely it is, but I think we have deliberated too much. I think this question was asked in the beginning of the session, I believe. So now the participant have the answer himself, and without quoting the words reason to believe. So it depends upon that, and definitely on the facts of the case. So preventive detention is possible, like I explained, we discussed at length together. So it depends, but definitely defeats the purpose of the law where the pressure is pulled by, arresting the person or asking that I will arrest you, you pay this much amount. That is not allowed, and that's there where the courts have come down heavily and said, no, you can't do these things. It has a specific, this power has specific purpose. You have to first see whether he has a reason to believe to exercise that power, and based on that, the action should be taken. So I think that will conclude our presentation also, because we have been talking throughout from last 3 years, reason to believe. I have a reason to believe, now the participant know what is reason to believe.
Mr. Dharnen Kumar, last question, because these topics are so interesting that we could have continued. But the last question, is there any similarity between detention and false imprisonment?
There is no such thing as false imprisonment, except that it could be illegal. So, and imprisonment, whenever we talk about whenever there is a judicial order. See, there is, so detention is only an officer prohibiting you from moving away. You do not have the freedom and you are detained. Okay, your this thing is your movement is detained, you are curtailed. Whereas arrest is when officially the officer serves you an arrest memo and he arrests you, saying that now you are in the custody of that officer, and within 24 hours either he grants bail if it is between 2 crore to 5 crore, but beyond 5 crore he has to produce you before a magistrate within 24 hours for formal bail, where you can apply formal bail, etc. And magistrate then can send you to judicial custody. That is not departmental custody anymore, that is judicial custody, and you then go through the normal formal process of bail, etc. Section 437, 439 of CRPC, all those provisions come into play. So what we are talking here, false imprisonment, is something that, there is no arrest memo. Then maybe that detention itself, long holding a person for 2 days, maybe somebody might say that this is false detention. What is then you can have the writ remedy of habeas corpus, that is for this very purpose. Or whenever there is a preventive detention, like earlier the preventive detention used to mean the COFE POSA for earlier laws, customs, etc. So Conservation of Foreign Exchange and Prevention of Smuggling Activities Act. And the purpose used to be that if this person is not prevented, he will continue to commit the same offense again and again. So a preventive detention order used to be passed, which was applicable or valid for 1 year. And then the person can be detained legally behind bars for 1 year. And in that 1 year, he cannot apply for bail. Only option was writ through habeas corpus. Now, here what we are talking about, that no, there is no COFE POSA kind of a situation or order, but officer is only detaining for 2 days without formal arrest. That is nothing but illegal detention or whatever. But yes, habeas corpus is the only remedy for such matters, no other. Or there is an option of, if one can prove there is a suit for malicious prosecution. That is for if you are prosecuted illegally or maliciously, then you can file even a suit for malicious prosecution and claim damages. That is also possible.
All right, thank you very much. Let me come to the conclusion of today's webinar. Let me ask each one of you, those who are still on, 440 I can see on Zoom, and 200 odd watching through YouTube Live. We have tried our best. with all the three learned speakers. First, I'm thanking to all three speakers, Mr. Sudipta, Mr. Sibam, Mr. Dhanend Kumar. In absentia, I'm thanking our Senior VP, Sri Pradeep Multani ji, for his opening remarks. And then thanking my PSD team, Dr. S.P. Sharma, Taranjeet, for doing this program, and thanking each one of you who has taken out your time and attending today's webinar. But before concluding, let me ask one question. Have you enjoyed today? If you have enjoyed today, tell me yes, you have enjoyed the session today. You can write in a chat box giving the positive vibration to each other. That will motivate for doing better and better. Doing certain things which is required for the benefit of each other. We have also tried to give our flavor that how we look at these critical provision of search and seizure, arrest, provisional attachment, parallel proceedings. So we have given our flavor as well. But nevertheless, we will again come back in coming month with a new topic. So you can remain in touch, stay tuned with the activities of Indirect Tax Committee of PSD Chamber of Commerce. Keep sending and posting your suggestion. In case you want us to represent any subject matter, please write back to us. IDT Committee of PSD Chamber of Commerce is one of the vibrant, I can say, an active committee as on date from GST perspective, who is taking many initiatives. At least we are trying from our side to make GST good and simple tax. And let's take this initiative forward for all of us together, joining hands together to represent our subject matter to the CBIC, Finance Ministry, GSTN or GST Council. So let me sum up saying that COVID still a threat for all of us. Take care of yourself. Third wave, so much of rumor which is going on. So I can only put a submission to all of you. Jaan hai to jahan hai. Take care of yourself first and then take care of your family. रहेंगे तो आगे पैसा बहुत कमाएंगे. पहले रहना जरूरी है. Jaan hai to jahan hai. But thanking each one of you and thanking all the speakers for their great work, their time, and their preparing the presentation, giving excellent presentation today. In absentia also to Sudipta as well. Otherwise, Mr. Sibam, Mr. Dhanend Kumar is there. So thanking once again to each of the participants joining us. So let's keep in touch and wish each one of you a happy, joyful days ahead, and we'll pass through COVID-19, and we will meet once again in PSD auditorium. That our physical seminar which we used to organize. Hopeful that maybe after September, October, we will do physical kind of seminar at PSD auditorium. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.